Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. I'm in the sea, sign in breathing on the opening day at the beginning. Chapter 41. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, the flying squirrel came to know. Fore Harbor. The three naval headquarters Vice Admiral, Momosuge, T. Dolphin and Huo Shaoshan, appeared on the courtyard wall not far away under the night. Momosuge glanced at it. Although it is night, there are still lights in Marineford, and it is not dimly lit here. On the number 4 harbor where there are pits everywhere, a black-haired boy stands there calmly and indifferently holding a long knife about the same height as him. That kid is Ron. Momosuge looked at the black-haired boy with interest. Last time I met Hina, that girl, it was this child who heard the most from her. What kind of child can make that proud and confident Hina care so much about just spending half a day with him? Momosuge is very interested. The T. Dolphin, who had sobered up, saw Momosuge beside him staring at the black-haired kid intently. Is that a specially recruited intern kid? It doesn't seem to be a big deal. Stop talking and watch it quietly. When Momosuge said, the T. Dolphin shut up immediately. On the number 4 harbor. As the flying squirrel slowly approached, Ron's eyes opened in an instant, his black hair went without wind, and a powerful sword force was released from him. Can you kill me today? The flying squirrel slowly pulled out the knife, and as he pulled the knife out of its sheath, a huge sword force instantly suppressed Ron's sword force, and completely pressed it back into his body. Before each competition, the flying squirrel would take the trouble to suppress Ron's sword, making him extremely uncomfortable. Let's start. The flying squirrel raised his long knife and pointed it at Ron. Ron stared at him without saying a word. He stepped on his foot, holding rapier in his right hand, and rushed towards the flying squirrel. When he came to him, he slashed with a knife, just like chopping wood, without any skill at all. The flying squirrel raised his long knife. Kang! The blades collided and made a clear sound. Ron was blocked with one blow and immediately cut out the second blow. Both the action and the slash are extremely rough and simple. It was easily blocked by flying squirrels. All of a sudden, the smashing sound of the swords in the number 4 harbor continued. Kang, kang, kang. Extremely rough and full of flaws. Does this guy really know how to use swordsmanship? T. Dolphin looked back, really couldn't stand it. Flying squirrels are too. Why are you fooling around with this kind of little guy? His gaze crossed the Huoshao mountain between the two, secretly looking towards Momosuge, who was still looking at the number 4 harbor. The side face is perfect, the skin can be broken by blows, the bridge of the nose is high, and the lips are smooth, so beautiful. If only she could be his wife. I have failed to confess to her 63 times. If I confess now, is it the 64th time? Will it succeed this time? Just as the T. Dolphin was looking at Momosuge and thinking about the 64th farewell in his mind, Huo Shaoshan suddenly leaned forward, blocking his vision. The T. Dolphin was a little annoyed. Hey, Huo Shaoshan, what the hell are you doing? Let me. Hey, what are you looking at? Why are you so shocked? T. Dolphin leaned forward and looked at the shocked Huoshao mountain on the side of No. 4 harbor. He was puzzled and couldn't help but follow his gaze. After seeing the 10-meter-long cut mark in front of the flying squirrel holding a knife in front of him, and at the end of the cut mark, Ron, who is holding a long knife in both hands, panting, the T. Dolphin's eyes couldn't help it shrunk. In the end, what happened? That was Zhanao's slash. Huo Shaoshan's voice was trembling at this moment. T. Dolphin's eyes gradually widened. Momosuge stared at the black-haired boy holding a long knife in both hands not far away, shocked. She saw clearly just now. That slash was undoubtedly a swordsman-level slash. Otherwise, it would never be possible to force the flying squirrel to slide back a few meters, nor to leave such cut marks on the hard harbor ground. The 11-year-old Zhanao. If Momosuge hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never even think about it. Is this why Hina valued him? Ron tried his best to work his breath, his short gasps finally calmed down. He slowly released his left hand holding the knife handle, only to find that both his hands were shaking. Not muscle fatigue, but excitement. How does it feel to be slashed out? The flying squirrel not far away looked at him with a complicated expression and asked. Ron looked at the trembling palm of his left hand, recalling how he felt when he cut. Very good. Very good. it seems that all the things that have been suppressed in the heart have burst out all at once, and it feels like the blow just now can be cut away no matter what. Remember that feeling, that is the realm of swordsmanship. The flying squirrel took the knife back into its sheath, but Ron was taken aback by the words he said. Ha what? The flying squirrel lit a cigarette. Whether it is sword power, sword intent or iron cutting, in the final analysis, this so-called swordsman realm is just a feeling of sword. The realm of swordsman's iron cutting is to have strong courage and will. Even if I hold a wooden stick in my hand, as long as I want to cut, even steel can be cut. This is the heroic spirit of a swordsman. Admiral of the sea can reach swordsmen in this realm are called swordsmen. Of course, it is by no means a simple matter for a swordsman to reach this state. It requires a long time of tempering and extremely high talent. The flying squirrel spit out smoke rings. Your talents and aptitudes are completely sufficient, and the sword intent is already master. You are far from the realm of the swordsman, but you don't have the arrogance to step into the realm of the swordsman. I have been deliberately suppressing your emotions, allowing your emotions to accumulate and finally burst out. I want to use this slash to let you experience firsthand what is a swordsman and what is the realm of slashing iron. The flying squirrel looked at Ron with a complicated expression. It's just that I didn't expect that you could cut this sword so quickly. Then I am now in the realm of the swordsman. Ron couldn't help asking. Flying squirrel shook his head. It's so possible. That feeling is just a moment, it's fleeting, you just stepped into the realm of iron cutting in an instant, if you want to really. The flying squirrel hadn't finished speaking yet. A slash swept past him. The cigarette in his mouth fell into two pieces. A crack of more than 10 meters long appeared on the ground in front of him again. Is that so? Exclamation mark quote. The flying squirrel opened his mouth wide, his chin almost smashed the floor in shock. Quote exclamation mark quote. How can this be? The T-Dolphin saw this scene with his own eyes, and the staring eyes were about to come out. Although Mamasigi and Huo Shaoshan have seen them once, they were shocked when they saw them again. That kid really stepped into the realm of a swordsman. The shocked flying squirrel looked at Ron with dull eyes, and his voice was trembling. You, how did you do it? Just as you said, remember that strong feeling, it burst out in an instant, and slashed out with the slash. Ron looked at him and tilted his head. No, it's impossible. The emotion that you broke out before was obviously suppressed by me for 2 months. It has already erupted. How can it break out again? The flying squirrel was unbelievable. Hearing what he said, Ron grinned at him. If I talk about anger, I can have as much as I want. Especially every time I see Mr. Flying Squirrel's face in this hairstyle, I can't help but angry. I feel that as long as you are here, Mr. Flying Squirrel, I can easily accumulate anger and become familiar with the explosive feeling. Listening to his words, the flying squirrel's eyes gradually widened. Under the dim moonlight, Ron carried Reikiri, tilted his head, his eyes glowing red, and he seemed to be exuding a strong black and red ghost. He tilted his head and grinned at the flying squirrel. The time is still there. Let me practice a few more times, Mr. Flying Squirrel. Looking at Ron's red eyes and a weirdly brilliant smile, an inexplicable chill spread in the flying squirrel's heart, making his scalp numb and his hair horrified. Could it be? What caused me trouble by suppressing him crazy for 2 consecutive months? Ron, whose eyes were glowing red, appeared in front of the flying squirrel, and cut with a knife. It's just a simple chop, but the action is extremely simple and decisive, without any muddling. After all, in the past 2 months, Ron has practiced this simplest slash no less than 100,000 times. He also found out, this kind of simplest, wide-open slash, can best burst out one's own momentum and strength all at once. This kind of simple slash is also the most close to the essence of kendo. If you have been relying on the sword to fight the enemy, always thinking about how to improve the power of the sword, it will make Ron gradually deviate from the essence of kendo and embark on a flashy road. The flying squirrel's guidance to Ron over the past 2 months can be regarded as correcting him, indicating the right direction for him to take the road of swordsmanship. Although he knew in his heart that flying squirrels did help him a lot. But Ron still didn't plan to let it go. At least let him lie down a few times. Sign. Die. Reikiri in Ron's hand made a perfect arc, slashing from top to bottom on the flying squirrel's raised knife. Kang, accompanied by a sharp collision of blades, it sounded. The two men clashed violently with swords. The raging wind swept around the place where the two confronted, and the dust on the ground was stirred up. Looking at the two Taoist figures constantly flickering on the number 4 harbor, holding their swords in opposition, there are two figures, one large and one small. The slashes that the two wielded raged around, and the ground was chopped away one after another, causing constant gusts of wind. Courtyard wall. Seeing the dumb T-Dolphin opened his mouth, dumbly said, I'm dreaming. That kid actually fought back and forth with flying squirrels. Huo Shaoshan touched his head and smiled bitterly. This is really amazing. After the shock, Momoshiki Gion gradually calmed down, a pair of enchanting beautiful eyes staring at Ron, who was constantly flashing in the court, regardless of defense, just blindly launching a stormy offensive toward the flying squirrel. Looking at the flying squirrel, who was so embarrassed by his offensive, Momoshiki couldn't help but bend her beautiful eyes slightly, and her mouth raised a charming smile. Ron, what a surprising little guy. The battle between the two lasted for more than 10 minutes, and the flying squirrel found an opportunity. She left here, leaving only a word. I have nothing to teach you. From tomorrow, you won't use it. Hoo. Ron, holding Reikiri in his right hand, was lying on the bumpy No. 4 harbor in a big font, with a big smile on his small face. Ha. Finally cut to that guy. The other side. Puff. Flying squirrel, your hair, ha. Seeing the half-short dried moxie head of the flying squirrel, the T-Dolphin couldn't help laughing. Momoshiki also covered his mouth and chuckled. That kid must have cut your hair on purpose. Huo Shaoshan laughed. It seems that I have had a lot of grievances against you before. Shut up. The flying squirrel's face was black like coal. Don't mention that kid with me. I didn't expect to hold such a grudge. If I knew it, even if Teacher Zephyr spoke in person, I wouldn't teach him. Hear the name Zephyr. The expressions of the three Momoshiki were slightly low. Ms. Zephyr, have you really resigned from all positions? Momoshiki said. Okay. After Momoshiki was silent for a while. Ms. Zephyr, where is it now? Huo Shaoshan, with his cigar in his mouth, spit out the smoke. It seems that the scientist at the Mechanical Institute went to him before, probably to help him get a robotic arm. Is it? Momoshiki said softly. She also came from the Marine Academy and received Zephyr's guidance and instruction. Unexpectedly, that teacher Zephyr, who is very firm in justice, will one day choose to resign. Don't tell anyone about tonight. The flying squirrel said suddenly. Huo Shaoshan glanced at the flying squirrel. It doesn't matter if you say it or not, I feel that it must be known from above. Then why didn't you find flying squirrels to drink tea? Didn't Vice Admiral order no one to teach that kid? T-Dolphin said in doubt. Maybe because Teacher Zephyr. Momoshiki guessed. Probably. The flying squirrel scratched his head. I mean, let you guys don't cut that kid out of Jonao's cut and talk to the upper one. Why, don't look at him when he dealt with me tonight. He slashed several swordsman-level slashes, but his actual swordsmanship did not reach the swordsman level. Momoshiki's beautiful eyes flashed slightly. He just touched it, does that mean? Yes. In fact, he still has a long way to go before he reaches the level of Jian Hao. The flying squirrel lit a cigarette and swallowed the clouds. That said, that kid is like a monster. I don't know if he will suddenly cross the threshold of the swordsman with both feet tomorrow. In short, after today, I will never accompany that kid to hone his swordsmanship again. He has nothing to do with me. Listening to what the flying squirrel said, the T-Dolphin scratched his head, his face full of distress and sorrow. The three monsters above, I didn't expect another monster to come behind. Haha, the new forces are catching up, isn't it great? Huo Shaoshan laughed. The main reason is that he is only a Marine intern and he has not officially joined Marine. If such a guy deviates from justice. T-Dolphin sighed and said, I understand the worries of Vice Admiral, this kid seems to be really a troublesome monster. The four of them walked forward along the dim road. Today, Ron, who swept away the depression in his chest, was relaxed and returned to his residence with a smile on his face. He lay in a wooden barrel full of hot water to relieve the physical and mental fatigue of the past 2 months. I have already touched the iron slashing realm, and what I have to do next is to gradually become familiar with the master's feelings. Ron thought to himself. Proud. The word flashed through Ron's mind. When Ron faced the flying squirrel before, the reason why he was able to cut out the swordsman-level slash was because of the suppressed anger in his heart. And this is just a deviation. If you want to truly reach the realm of a swordsman, you must accumulate the pride of being a swordsman in your heart. He has great pride in his chest, and his will is as strong as iron. Hero. Ron closed his eyes, and what Koshiro said to him when he left the dojo appeared in his mind. Ron, since you are a swordsman, you must have something to hold on to your heart. Only when your heart is firm and clear, and what you do will never go against your heart, so that you can agitate the heroic spirit of being a swordsman in your chest and be determined. Like a rock, the slashes you sway can be unbreakable, nothing unbreakable. Ron can now understand what Koshiro said. There is something to hold in your heart, and it stands on the river like a rock, handles everything without being surprised, suffering without resentment, and staying in the realm of the Jedi without retreating. The really powerful slash is from the heart. This is the realm of swordsman's iron slashing. Ron opened his eyes, their eyes clear and bright. He could already see the path through the realm of Jian Hao. At the same time, with his perception of kendo, he took it to the next level. The sword intent of his whole body also rose rapidly. All the accompanying swordsmanship carried by the other breathing methods derived from the sun breathing method evolved in his mind. The breath of water has evolved from the 1 type to the 10th type. The breath of flame, moon breath, the breath of the sun. After Ron opened his eyes again, he already knows that the master has removed all sword moves except for the ultimate secret sword moves associated with these breathing methods. System, list my current attribute list. OK. Host, Ron. Age, 11. Blood value, swordsmanship, the realm of Yi Dacheng. The master degree of breathing of the sun is 98%. Weapon, 21 work of big sharp knife Reikiri. Permanent buff thousands of tempers no true meaning binding. Armament hockey, LV3. Observation hockey, LV1. Conqueror's hockey, LV0. Shaving, LV1. Moonwalk, LV1. Tempest kick, LV2. Special skills, mechanical grandmaster. Has the master degree of the sun breathing method reached 98%? Ron's eyes shone slightly. In the next few days, he focused on the practice of Rizzi breathing. It is intended to reach 100% completion as soon as possible. 5 days later, the master degree of sun breathing method reaches 99%. 10 days later, the master degree of sun breathing method reaches 100%. At the moment of reaching 100%, the system prompt sounded in Ron's mind. Sun breathing method master degree is 100%. Host gains a special ability to penetrate the world. An extremely strange feeling came to Ron's heart. This is the transparent world. Is it? It's somewhat similar to observation hockey, but it's not the same. Ron, who opened the transparent world, felt this power in detail. The world he felt became extremely clear, and countless details emerged, including the flow of air, floating dust, temperature and humidity, various scents, as well as the flow of blood and blood of people passing by, and the breathing of people in the distance. It's clear. The range is probably within 10 meters of him as the center. Try it with observation hockey. Ron closed his eyes. The invisible observation hockey unfolded and instantly enveloped the area with him as the center and a radius of 10 meters. Through the world, observation hockey. The two are combined. Ron instantly felt that in this area of about 10 meters around him, everything seemed to have slowed down, and countless details seemed to be spread out in front of him. Great. Ron opened his eyes and couldn't help his face full of excitement. Through the world and observation hockey, the combination of the two, the effect is not 1 + 1, but a qualitative improvement. No need to think about how effective this ability to feel all the details can be in a battle. The only downside, it is that Ron's reach is not enough now, only about 10 meters in radius, unable to cope with attacks with huge coverage. If my observation hockey improves and my perception ability expands, this area should also expand. Ron opened his eyes and thought to himself. Sudden. Ron instinctively felt that his eyes were spying on him. He narrowed his eyes and dissipated observation hockey, but did not close the transparent world. As his thoughts flowed, the world transparent area gradually changed from a circular area centered on him to a long strip, extending in the direction he felt prying. Observation hockey may be felt by the masters of Grandmaster hockey, but this transparent world will not. After the world permeable area extended there, Ron immediately smelled a very nice fragrance. At the same time, a clear picture emerged in his mind. In a building about 100 meters away from him, a man dressed in a coat of justice, a slender figure, a pair of large white legs, slender and straight, and a beautiful black hair Oni-san stood on the third-floor window-sill, with curvy eyes, looking at him with a light smile. There was a long sword hanging from her waist, which made her look colder and colder. That person is... A name appeared in Ron's mind. Momoshige Gion, the beautiful swordsman in Marine, the future admiral candidate. Judging from the looming sword power she felt, she was absolutely like a flying squirrel, and she had already stepped into the realm of swordsmanship. And one thing that puzzled Ron was, the Momoshige he felt through the transparent world was not at all hostile to him, but curiosity and kindness towards him. I obviously don't know her, why? Ron touched his head in confusion. Momoshige didn't know that he had noticed himself. She lay on the railing, looking at the small figure in the distance, her eyes filled with moving smiles. What are you looking at? Vice Admiral walked to her and followed her gaze. At a glance, he saw Ron standing on a harbor clearing with a long knife on his back. That kid. Well, it's interesting. Momoshige lowered his head, put his chin on his arm lying on the railing, looked at the little figure and smiled. Just like the girl Hina said, in this dull and serious Marine headquarters, he is like a gray the green grass grows on the wall. Looking at him can also make me feel this, as if I am going back to when first joined Marine. The gaze in Momoshige's eyes was a little nostalgic. He glanced at her and snorted coldly with his arms folded. You are not too big now, and the girl Hina, obviously it is the time when you were young, what it means to sing youth and miss youth. One by one, I think there are fewer tasks for you. Haha, it might be so. Momoshige curled his eyes and smiled. Then she turned to look at the crane next to Vice Admiral and asked, he doesn't plan to join Marine yet? Vice Admiral shook his head. After experiencing Zephyr, I don't think he will agree to join Marine now. Do you feel confident of success? Momoshige looked at her and asked. Wearing a coat of justice and holding his arms, Vice Admiral looked at the small figure in the distance and said, through the Huo Shaoshan, their contact with him, and the judgment of his behavior and character, I think he finally joined Marine. The possibility is very small, maybe he will follow his initial decision, neither join Marine nor become a pirate. Ron, who opened the transparent world, heard her and his eyes moved slightly. Is this the Crane Vice Admiral? With his character and behavior, he can roughly guess his purpose and decision. As expected of Marine's brains. Since you think he won't join Marine, then you and the Marshal still choose to let him stay here. Momoshige was puzzled. Crane Vice Admiral looked at her and smiled. That child, whether here or not here, will become very strong. Let him stay here and get along with Marine day and night. It's better to be friends with some pirates. Even if he does not join Marine in the future, as long as his attitude and actions can be slightly biased towards Marine at critical times, it may be a great help for us. Of course, these are just my considerations and plans. Others also have different opinions. It is still hard to say whether he will continue to stay in Marine headquarters in the end. In 2 years, a decision should be made by then. Listening to Suru's words, Momoshige looked at the small figure and nodded lightly. 3 days after Ron understood the transparent world and overheard the conversation between Momoshige and Crane. He took out the silver pistol with unlimited bullets from the system space. Guns and swords are both a man's romance. Ron is no exception. The shape of this silver pistol resembles the revolver he used to travel through the world. It is silver and white and very handsome. The bullet is also silver, which is more powerful, faster, and more penetrating than the lead bullet in this world. Although it was an infinite bullet, it was different from Ron's imagination. There were only 6 bullets per day, and it would be refreshed again the next day after it was used up. Ron mastered Mechanical Grandmaster's ability. As soon as he touched this silver pistol, he completely mastered how to use it and became a master of firearms. With observation hockey and transparent world, he is sure to be able to achieve success. If the bullet is wrapped around hockey, I am afraid that the power will become even greater. For some capable people, it will be a lethal weapon. Ron wanted to try the power of this gun. It's just that now I'm in Marineford, and the experiment is too much, and it may cause unnecessary trouble, so Ron had to give it up for the time being. The mechanical grandmaster skill may have other uses. Ron, who had no training target for the time being, focused his attention on the mechanical grandmaster skill. He has a lot of ideas in his mind. With the mechanical grandmaster skill, as long as the materials and tools are sufficient, he can completely create something. It happened at this time. Garp, who hadn't seen him for a long time, ended his arrest mission, returned to Marineford, and appeared in front of him. Do you want to go to the machinery room? Garp looked at Ron in front of him, his mouth wide open and almost forced a fist. Okay. Ron nodded at him. Of course, if you can't go, then forget it. Wait, first tell me what you are going to do in the machine room. There are only some scientific equipment and scientists wearing glasses, but there is no strong person who can help you practice. Garp was a little uncomfortable by Ron's words. Of course I know this. Ron looked at Garp as expected. I'm going to the machine room, naturally I want to make things. Making things. Just you. Garp bent over, stared suspiciously at Ron, then burst into laughter. Wow, ha 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 ha. What's so funny? I'm not kidding. Ron said sternly at him. Wah ha ha ha. Garp looked at his serious look and couldn't help laughing louder, even tears came out of his eyes. Wow ha 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 ha. I thought Ron, you are a staid personality, I didn't expect to be joking like this. Looking at Garp's reaction, Ron was a little annoyed at first, but after thinking about it carefully, he gradually calmed down. Although I want to delve into machinery, this is the Marine headquarters after all. Too much display is not good for him. If Marine notices his potential and value in this area, he may not be able to go if he wants to go in the future. Look for opportunities after you leave Marineford. After thinking clearly, he fell back onto the bed. Forget it, just treat it as a joke. He turned to look at Garp while lying on the bed. Old man, have you returned to Windmill Town during this time? After laughing enough, Garp took out a bag of donuts from his arms, sat down on the chair, and said, No, I just caught a big pirate. I have to send him to Impel Down tomorrow. I will come back this time to see how you are. I had a phone call with Dayton in Windmill Town. Everything is fine, but, quote, just what, a month and a half ago, that little girl Kuina seemed to have left. Garp took out a donut. It seems that he has also gone to sea, now he is missing. Ron was stunned. Kuina, have you already gone to sea? I already know about Zephyr. I didn't expect Doflamingo to be so bold that he would dare to attack warships. Garp was talking, eating the donuts. Did you meet him this time? Ron recovered and nodded at him. How does it feel? Life and death are on the line. Ha ha ha, the description is very accurate. Garp laughed. With your current strength, if you face him alone, you will definitely die. Next time I see him, I will let him experience this feeling. Ron said flatly. Ha ha ha, well said. Garp laughed at Ron as he ate the donut. See the strong and surpass them to become stronger. I know all this. Ron, who was lying on his back, looked at the ceiling and said, How is he doing, Zephyr Admiral? He is not Admiral anymore. Click. Garp took a bite of the donut. He's okay. Now he's gone to the scientific institution. The scientist over there seems to be preparing to build a robotic arm for him, as if he had proposed it on his own initiative. An old guy like him, even after retiring, I still won't stop. Is it? Ron said nothing more. After Garp sat for a while, he was about to leave. Ron looked at his back and said, Old man, you are going to Impel Down soon, right? Yes, what's the matter? Take me with you. The next day, Ron left Marineford with Garp's warship and headed for Impel Down. To get to Impel Down from Marineford, you need to first arrive at Ennie's Lobby, go through the Gate of Justice behind Ennie's Lobby, and finally arrive at the Great Prison of the Deep, which is Impel Down. After the warship arrived at Ennie's Lobby, Ron followed Garp off the warship. The person who came to greet them was Spandane, the CP9 chief of the secret spy agency directly under the Ennie's Lobby world government, and the two of them were following him. One is in his early 20s and one is in his early 30s. Ron's eyes fell on the young man in his early 20s with a black top hat and a pigeon on his shoulder. If he guessed the right words, this guy is the future CP9 captain, world government ace killer, the strongest killing weapon. Rob Lucci. When Ron was looking at him, Lu Chi's gaze also fell on him, with a trace of scrutiny and doubt. This kid is the rumored intern specially recruited by Marine headquarters. The two eyes crossed. Ron, carrying Reikiri on his back, looked away and fell on the pigeon on his shoulder. He squeezed his chin and murmured, "This pigeon is fat and white. I don't know how it tastes when grilled." Lu Chi squinted his eyes when he heard what he said. At this time, Marine on the warship lifted out a huge steel cage. Inside was a large and tall figure with a pair of sharp horns and a pair of sharp horns on his head, which had his hands and feet handcuffed by seastone. Well, this guy is the evil king, Abalo Pizarro. The son next to Spandam. Spandam looked at the figure in the cage, his eyes widened, and he was extremely shocked. Listening to Spandam's shocked voice, Lu Chi also turned his head and glanced over there. "Spandane, this guy will leave it to you." Garp spoke to Spandane with his cigar in his mouth. Ron looked at him. This guy with a pair of triangular eyebrows got the golden phone worm permission from Sengoku as a Buster Call launcher, and started Buster Call and destroyed Spandane in Ohara, Robin's hometown. Ha ha ha, this is a guy offering a reward of 160 million. Unexpectedly, he was arrested by Garp Vice Admiral. He deserves to be a Marine hero, Garp Vice Admiral. Spandane looked at Abaro Pizarro in the cage and laughed at Garp with his cigar in his mouth. "We will give the result of the trial as soon as possible. Before that, please take Garp Vice Admiral to rest in Eni's lobby. Lu Chi, go and send this guy to the trial house." Lu Chi nodded, glanced over Ron, and then led someone to take over the imprisoned King Abalo Pizarro and head towards the trial. "Is that young Rob Lucci? I heard that the world government takes him seriously." Garp glanced at him and smiled at Spandane. "You have a very good subordinate." "Not Garp Vice Admiral either." Spandane looked at Ron, who was carrying Reikiri next to Garp, and grinned. "This boy should be the rumored Marine recruiter. Is it a disciple of Garp Vice Admiral? Wow, ha ha ha, the old man is not this kid's teacher." Garp laughed. "Is it?" Spandane glanced at Ron, then turned his head and smiled at Garp. "Garp Vice Admiral, I still have something to deal with. Forgive me not to continue to entertain him. It's okay, I've been to Eni's lobby a few times. Go ahead and take care of you. I'll wait for you at the Bridge of Hesitation." Garp waved his hand. "I understand." Spandane nodded, and left with Spandam, who had not yet gone to serve on CP5. "Dip, check where the host is Eni's lobby, and meet the sign-in conditions. Do you sign in?" The voice of the system rang in Ron's mind. "Sign in. Sign-in is completed. Get a sign-in reward. Blood value plus 10. Get the sign-in reward. Fairy Bean 1. Shondo. Is it the Fairy Bean in Dragon Ball?" A look of surprise flashed in Ron's eyes. And not waiting for him to check its attributes, Garp's voice rang in his ears. "Boy Ron, do you know the young man with a black top hat next to Spandane?" Ron looked at him. Garp wearing a dog's head hat hugged his arms and looked in the direction where Spandane and others had left and said, "Rob Lucci, who joined CP9 at the age of 13 and 20 years old this year, has executed countless criminals through his hands. He is known as the strongest and coldest killing weapon in CP9 history, and the strongest in CP9. What do you want to say? I mean, let you try not to provoke him in the future. Whether it is the world government behind him or his ability, it is a very troublesome guy." Garp turned his head and smiled at Ron. "And in terms of strength, now you are against him, what chance do you think you have?" 10%, Ron said flatly. "Garp, is this kid so confident now?" Ron was not blindly confident. Rather, Ron has already roughly understood the strength of Lucci through the transparent world just now. Although very strong, it is definitely not Ron's opponent now. Master observation Haki, armament Haki, and Ron who see through the world, even if they don't use swordsmanship, their current strengths are probably stronger than those in the original book that opened the second gear 9 years later and defeated Luffy's Luffy at that time. Not to mention the current Lucci. The Bridge of Hesitation. It usually shrinks and opens only when the prisoner is escorted to the Gate of Justice. The Gate of Justice is at the end. Garp's warship is waiting at the end of this bridge for Eni's lobby to send the villainous King Abaro Pizarro after the trial. Almost 4 hours later, the Bridge of Hesitation opened, and Lucci slowly walked from the other side of the bridge with the imprisoned evil king. After the warship took over, he left here and headed towards the door of justice that slowly opened. Lu Qi stood at the end of the hesitation bridge, watching the warship slowly leave. When the warship passed through the gate of justice, the system reminder sounded in Ron on the deck again. Dip, check where the host is the gate of justice, and meet the sign in conditions, do you sign in? The voice of the system rang in Ron's mind, and Ron was quite surprised. Sure enough, it was the right time to follow Garp this time. Sign in. Sign in is completed, get a sign in reward, blood value +10. Ron felt the heat in his body and the sensation of tearing the muscles, and checked the properties of the fairy bean. No matter what the injury, it is completely restored to its peak state. It is indeed the fairy bean in the Dragon Ball. Just an Enies lobby made me sign in twice. There is also a deep-sea prison impel down. I don't know what rewards there will be for signing in there. Ron was full of expectations. In short, this time is a big profit. Impel down in front of the door. When Garp's warship arrived, the prison director Magellan and the prison director Hannibal had been waiting for a long time. Garp Vice Admiral, the poisonous man of Paramesha poison fruit ability, tall, with a pair of horns and 2 black wings on the back, Magellan, who resembles Satan, paid a military salute to Garp earnestly. Hannibal stood straight next to him, raised his hand to salute to Garp, and said with a trembling tone, Ka, Garp Vice Admiral. I am the newly appointed Deputy Director Hannibal. Being the director of prison is my biggest wish. Ah, I was excited and accidentally said it again. 23. Ha ha ha, don't care. Garp smiled at him, then looked at Magellan and said, this guy will leave it to you. Magellan nodded, then turned to look at Hannibal next to him. Hannibal, you take someone to send the evil King Abaro Pizarro to the eternal hell on the 6th floor. Ming, understand. Hannibal planned to make up for it, and immediately greeted the jailer beasts around him, and took over the evil King Abalo Pizarro in the cage from Marine. Magellan's expression suddenly became a little strange. He pressed his stomach with one hand and said to Garp and others, Garp Vice Admiral, I'm sorry, I have something else, so I will go back first. Well, go ahead. Garp nodded in a dog hat. Magellan immediately turned and ran into Impel Down. Puff puff. Hannibal, who was directing the jailer beasts, chuckled, Magellan must have gone to the toilet with diarrhea again. Puff. Poisonous fruit, really hard. Garp said with emotion that he also knew about Magellan's situation. Although the fruit was very powerful, the side effects were also great. He was affected by the poisonous gas and suffered from diarrhea for more than 10 hours a day. Well, this guy has already been handed over, and there is nothing to do with us next, let's go back. Garp turned around. After turning around, he suddenly realized that Ron beside him was missing. Garp turned his head and looked around. Suddenly I saw the little figure that had entered the gate of Impel Down. When, and Ron, who had just entered Impel Down, immediately heard the system prompt sound. Dip, check host location Impel Down, sign in as possible, do you sign in? Sign in. After signing in, get the sign in reward, blood value +10. Get the sign in reward, observation hockey level up. Current observation hockey, LV2. One hand broke through the air and grabbed Ron. When Ron, who had just strengthened observation hockey, noticed the sudden attack, he immediately planned to avoid it. But when he had just planned to dodge, the speed of that hand suddenly became faster. What? Ron was taken aback. In the next second, the big hand grabbed his back collar, and directly picked him up. I told you not to run around. Garp, wearing a dog-headed hat, carried Ron and yelled at him, want to hide? Your kid is not far away. Ron gritted his teeth bitterly. The old man, not to mention anything else, this strength is really terrifying. He opened the transparent world, and he could see Anhar, the chi and blood in Garp's body, like the rushing river, and the ultimate steel-like bones after thousands of tempers. The muscles are even more tenacious. Seen in Enies lobby before. Compared with the old man, the Lu Chi that arrived is a world of difference. It's hard to imagine how long and how hard it takes for the human body to reach this level. Garp's armament hockey is definitely the top in the pirate world, and it can even be said that there is no one. His observation hockey has definitely reached a level far surpassing Ron. In the catch just now, even if Ron turned on transparent world and observation hockey at the same time, he could sense his attack and trajectory, but he could not hide. Ron can only now see how far he is from the old man. When he was in Windmill Town, he was able to hit this old man. It was really Garp who gave him a C. Ron, who is aware of the current disparity in strength between the two, is Junji, and he chose not to settle accounts with the old man Garp, but to write down the account secretly in his heart for the time being, and it will not be too late to find the place later. Looking at the face full of honesty, Garp walked past everyone behind his collar, like a little black-haired boy who was caught stealing a kitten. Hannibal couldn't help snickering. Puff! Immediately, a sharp, oppressive gaze fell on him. Hannibal felt a chill behind his back and turned to look. I saw that the black-haired boy who was carried by Garp Vice Admiral was staring at him coldly, his eyes under the broken bangs were extremely sharp. Being stared at by his gaze, Hannibal was inexplicably cold, and a drop of cold sweat slowly slipped off his forehead. After Garp returned to the warship with Ron in his arms, Hannibal felt the suffocating pressure disappear. He couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and he was terrified. That kid, what is? The warship returned to Marineford from Impel down in the comm belt. After putting Ron down at Marineford, Garp is out on a mission again. Ron resumed his usual peaceful life in Marineford, and went out with some warships from time to time. Hina also returned to Marineford after half a month. She has been promoted from ensign to lieutenant junior grade. After she came back, the first thing she did was to find Ron and Momoshiki. Go shopping with her. Soon, more than 2 years have passed. Ron is 14 years old. It has been 3 years since he came to Marineford, and it's almost time to end his marine internship and make a clear decision. This day, Lieutenant Junior Grade Hina, who was wearing a coat of justice and a suit, was tall and graceful, with long and straight legs. When she came to Ron's room, she reached out and knocked on the door. The door opened. Ron, who appeared in front of her, was wearing a black t-shirt and white half-length pants. He was well-proportioned and slender, with semi-long black hair, and his forehead bangs were hanging down, making him extremely refreshed and clean. The figure is well-proportioned and slender, and the temperament is calm and indifferent. With his face that is absolutely handsome in Pirate World, it looks very seductive. In 2.5 years, Ron's height has grown a lot. Compared to Hina, who is a little over 1.8 meters tall, she is only half a head short. Did you call me over? Ron looked at Hina in front of him. With a pale pink shawl with long hair and a pair of sunglasses hanging on her forehead, the glamorous Hina nodded to him with her arms in her arms. Then go. Ron picked up Reikiri, who was leaning aside, holding the scabbard in his left hand, and walked out of the room. The two walked side by side to the outside of the building. When they walked outside, under the sun, Hina couldn't help but look to the side of Ron's side and asked. Really decided? Don't think about it anymore. I have decided. Ron said calmly. Is it? Hina looked a little lost when she heard this. Ron glanced at her and smiled. Although I can't come to Marineford again, I can still see you on the sea again. Let's go out and play together again. Okay. Marineford, headquarters building. After Hina brought Ron here, she didn't follow in, but waited downstairs. In the headquarters building, General Marines can be seen everywhere. Some of them knew Ron, and many of them didn't. They looked at Ron differently. Ron calmly came to the marshal's office under the guidance of a Marine general. Inside the marshal's office, Marshal Sengoku sits behind the table. The 3 positions on the left are Vice Admiral Garp, Admiral Alternate Aokiji Kuzan, and the 2 positions on the right are Vice Admiral, Admiral Alternate Akainu Sakazuki. When Ron stepped into the marshal's office, all these people's eyes fell on him. The oppressive force was not something ordinary people could bear, but Ron's expression was already calm. Sengoku behind the table looked at Ron standing at the door, holding the famous knife Reikiri, and said, Ron, your 3 years as a specially recruited intern has passed, now is the time to make a decision. Under the headquarters building, Momoshiki Gion, wearing a coat of justice with a long sword hanging from his waist, walked to the side of Hina, who was leaning against the wall with a pair of slender and straight white legs, dangling a thin cigarette and looking up at the sky. Sister Gion, you were right. Sure enough, he still doesn't plan to change his mind. Momoshiki asked softly. Hina spit out smoke and hummed. That's really a pity, Momoshiki said, looking at the marshal's office above. These 2.5 years. The relationship between her and Hina and Ron is getting closer and familiar. The three of them are like two sisters and a younger brother. The two would visit him every time they came back from a mission. It can be said that she and Hina just watched Ron grow up. And now, he is leaving. Ron finally decided to leave Marine. After he made a decision, he left Sengoku's office decisively. Diaresis, the Zephyr thing really affected his perception of Marine. Crane Vice Admiral said with a calm expression. Sengoku clenched his fist slightly on the table. Garp sighed. Akainu snorted coldly. I said long ago that this kind of internship system is simply useless waste. If he really had justice in his heart, he would have joined Marine a long time ago and he would not hesitate at all. If he becomes a pirate in the future, I will be the first to kill him. There was a hint of hostility in Akainu's eyes under the brim of his hat. Shut up, Sakazuki. Sengoku annoyed. He didn't get anything in our Marine anyway. Whether he left or stayed has no effect on us. Aokiji said. Yes, praised it well. He said, when we agreed to his request, didn't we also consider that he would choose to leave? Since he chose not to leave as a Marine intern, then the matter will end here. If he has something to do signs of evil. I invited him to join Marine. It was also the old man who made the proposal of Marine intern. If he becomes a villain on the sea in the future, the old man will take this responsibility. Garp said lowly. Hearing Garp's words, no one was talking anymore. Akainu stood up, supported the brim of his hat, and glanced sideways at Garp and said. I hope that then, Garp Vice Admiral will not be merciful. A few days later, a warship came to Sabayati Archipelago, and Ron walked down from it. Wearing black trousers, a white t-shirt, and a military green hooded long trench coat, he is wearing an orange travel cap with a suitcase on his back, holding Reikiri in his hand, turning his head and waving at Momoshiki and Hina on the warship with a smile. Hands coming out. Just send it here. Gion, Hina, see you in the sea again later. Didn't you ask you to call me Sister Hina, you Ron? Hina is very angry. Hina yelled at him annoyed. Gion waved at him with a gentle smile. Be careful all the way, if you change your mind, come back. With a thin cigarette in her mouth and sunglasses on her forehead, Hina put her hands on the railing, and rushed down. Ron shouted, I will do something later and give me some consequences. I don't want to see you in prison next time. I see, then do this first, bye. Ron turned and waved his back to the two women. Hina stroked her forehead with her hand, her glamorous face was full of helplessness. That guy still doesn't like to listen to others' words as always, Hina is helpless. Hina, Ron's current strength, do you know? Hina was taken aback by the sudden question of Gion, and then thought for a while. I played with him half a year ago. At that time, it was a tie. Now his strength should have risen a bit, but it should be about the same as me. Bar. After listening to her, the smile on Gion's beautiful face grew stronger. What's wrong? Hina wondered. No, it's nothing. Gion, with a light smile on his face, watched the figure leave. I don't know when we meet next time. It should be soon. The powerful little guy. Momoshiki seemed to think of something, and lightly touched Sakura's lips with his fingers, and his beautiful cheeks were slightly flushed. Dip, check where the host is, Sabayati Archipelago, and meet the sign-in conditions. Do you sign in? Sign in. Sign in is successful, get a sign-in reward, blood value plus 10. Get the sign-in reward, special skill language grandmaster. When Ron left Marine, he started his travel career with Sabayati Archipelago. Grand Line, the base of the Revolutionary Army. The island of White Earth, Baldico. Amidst the yellow sand that was raging by the wind. Two figures in black cloaks, one large and one small, walked slowly forward, and behind them there were many people in the same costume. Sabo is really here, a Qingyu female voice resounded with doubts. Really here, but his situation is a bit special. The voice of neither man nor woman came from under the big cloak. Look, that's the city in front. The two figures, one large and one small, in front of the large army came first to the city. Many figures stood under the city, seeming to be waiting for their arrival. A tall figure headed by the Revolutionary Army leader, Monkey Dragon. There was a yellow-haired teenager with a hat and a short-haired orange girl beside him. When I saw the yellow-haired boy, the girl under the black cloak opened her eyes slightly. Sabo, who heard his name, looked at her in surprise. Am I right? The man under the large cloak next to him opened the cloak and revealed that huge face. It was one of the cadres of the Revolutionary Army, the Shemale King Ivankov. Guess who is here? Ivankov laughed at the dragon, Sabo and others. Their eyes fell on the slender figure in the black robe with two swords hanging on the waist. When she lifted the cloak, after revealing a beautiful face with a smile on his face, Long and others were taken aback for a moment. Sabo stared at her blankly. Why, I feel a little familiar. No, you can't recognize it. Ivankov looked incredible. She's Kuina, Shuangyu Kuina, Shimotsky Koshiro's daughter. She was on our boat before, with the boy named Ron. Hearing what he said, Long and others only then remembered. So it was the little girl from that time. Haku looked at Kuina in front of him in surprise. This has only been the past few years. How can people recognize the changes so much? It has changed a lot. Kuina, who is 15 years old, is now over 1.75 meters tall. Her short blue hair has become a long high ponytail. Her body has become much more refined. Her legs are even longer and straight, full of tension. Sense, the word Hidao and another long knife hung on one side of his waist, wrapped in a black robe, showing the swordsman's swift and capable skills to the full. Gu, Ina. Sabo stared at her blankly, as if something was about to come to mind, but at this moment, a severe headache stopped everything. What? He hugged his head in pain and squatted down. Sabo, Koala, a girl with short orange hair next to him, looked worried and concerned. Kuina saw this scene and cast a puzzled look at Ivankov next to him. This is. Let's say it, something went wrong with him. Ivankov said helplessly. After being rescued by us, all his memories were lost. I didn't expect him to be your friend with Ron boy. It turned out to be so. Then Kuina understood everything. Koala, you take Sabo home first. The dragon said. Koala nodded, and walked back to the city with Sabo. Long cast his eyes on Kuina. Where is the boy named Ron? Isn't he with you? Ron and I have been apart for 3 years, and we have agreed that we will become stronger, and then we will meet again in the ocean. Kuina supported the hilt of the knife with a word on her waist, and whispered softly. Is that so? Long nodded. Then do you have a place to go now? Where to go? Kuina shook her head. I don't have much where I want to go. As long as there is a strong man who can make my swordsmanship stronger, I will go wherever I can. In that case, do you want to consider staying here for the time being? If you are the strong, there are quite a few here. The dragon looked at Kuina and said, whenever you want to leave in the future, you can leave at any time. After thinking for a while, Kuina looked at him and nodded. Then bother. Sabayati Archipelago. Is it here? Wearing a long army green trench coat with his hands in his trench coat pockets, Ron came to a pub named Shaki's Ripping Bar. He stepped forward and opened the door, accompanied by a clear bell. Shaki behind the counter turned to look. Allah, here comes a handsome boy. Shaki put down the newspaper in his hand, smoking a cigarette and looking at the approaching Ron, smiling and asking. Is my brother here for a drink? Or do you want to come here to buy some information? Any kind of information. Ron looked at her and smiled. Including going to Raftel. Sure. Shaki spit out his cigarette and smiled at Ron, as long as the price is affordable. Forget it, I'm not interested in that. Ron sat down at the counter and looked at the wine cabinet behind Shaki. Does Sabayati Archipelago have any special wine? Of course, Sabayati Archipelago is a highlight, especially Sabayati, which is a famous wine on the entire Grand Line. Shaki said, taking out a bottle from the wine cabinet behind him and placing it in front of Ron. It's just that the price is a bit expensive. This bottle is 200,000 Baileys. No problem. Ron took a heavy cloth bag from his arms and put it on the table. Shaki took it, opened it, and looked at it. There were gold coins inside, with a total value of more than 200,000 Baileys. Ron picked up the glass goblet on the counter and poured himself a glass. The bubbles in this wine were indeed many times more than what he had drunk before, and the aroma was much richer. It's really good wine. Ron drank it in one gulp, his lips and teeth fragrant. Shaki, with a cigarette in one hand and his chin in the other, leaned on the wine cabinet and looked at him with a smile. Unexpectedly, my brother is not old, but he is good at wine tasting. I'm afraid I can get together with the guy in my family. Pluton Rayleigh. Ron looked at Shaky and smiled as he poured the wine. Is he at home today? Hear what he said. Shaky froze for a moment, then looked at Ron, his eyes narrowed slightly. It seems that my brother didn't just want to drink. Ron looked at the bubbling sobayati in the glass goblet and said. Relax, I have no ill intentions. I just passed by this sobayati archipelago. I happened to know that the legendary Pluton Rayleigh was here, so I planned to come and meet. He picked up the goblet, looked at Shaky and smiled. Those extra money for buying wine is considered to be buying this information. Shaky looked at him, stood up straight, and spit out smoke. Can you tell me your name before I answer you? My name is Ron. Hearing the name, Shaky thought quickly in his mind, flipping through the memory. No impression at all. No wonder. The only time Ron's name came out of the sea was 3 years ago, and only once. In addition, it was a major event that disturbed the sea and I had never done it. There are absolutely no photos. No matter how good an intelligence dealer is, it is impossible to associate the 11-year-old intern specially recruited by Marine with the mysterious boy who appeared in front of him at this time by a single name. Shaky chose to give up thinking. She took a breath and looked at Ron and said. In the case of Rayleigh, I went to the casino today, maybe I will be back this evening, or it may be several days later. Ron nodded when he heard this, and looked at Shaky and said, Is that so, then I'll wait until the evening. Is there any more wine like this? Ron had good luck. At dusk, Rayleigh carried a bag and a wine bottle in his hand, and walked back to the pub while drinking. Shaky, see how much I won today. Rayleigh put the bag in his hand on the counter and smiled triumphantly at Shaky. Shaky glanced at it and said flatly, I'll lose it in 2 days anyway. Rayleigh, with long curly hair, a beard on his chin, silver beard and hair, glasses, and a straight scar on his right eye, Rayleigh laughed outright. Ha ha, maybe. Ron looked at him and got up from the counter seat on the side. Rayleigh also noticed Ron at this time. There are guests. I'm looking for you. Shaky opened his mouth. Looking for me. Rayleigh was slightly surprised, and then reacted. He looked at Ron walking towards him and laughed. I see. I was looking for the coating. No, Pluton Rayleigh. Ron flickered, straddling a few meters, and appeared in front of Rayleigh. This scene caused Shaky's pupils to shrink slightly, and the drunken Rayleigh's eyes were also slightly condensed. Ron, with his hands in the pockets of the army green trench coat, raised a pair of sharp eyes and looked directly at Pluton Rayleigh in front of him, calmly saying, I'm here to challenge you. Challenge me. Rayleigh froze for a moment, then laughed. I haven't heard this sentence for a long time. He looked at the black-haired boy in front of him, his eyes narrowed slightly under his glasses. Ron felt a huge and astonishing pressure and aura from the old man in front of him, like a mountain, pressing down on his shoulders. Not conqueror's hockey, just pure, the boldness of being a strong. Ron squinted his eyes, a red glow flashed through the depths of the pitch-black eyes. In an instant, his black hair was windless, and an equally astonishing aura radiated from him. The auras of the two collided together, and strong winds surged out like ocean waves. A flash of surprise flashed in Rayleigh's eyes. This kid. Stop it all. Shaky's annoyed voice came into the ears of the two of them. Go and fight outside, don't ruin my shop. The two of them dissipated the momentum almost at the same time. The tavern, which was just like a sea of violent wind and waves, became calm again in an instant. Follow me. After Rayleigh stared at Ron in front of him and said this, he walked out of the tavern first. Ron looked around. Some things were blown over by the two men's imposing collisions, and some wine also fell to pieces. Ron scratched his face with his fingers. Then he stepped to the wine cabinet, put a heavy cloth bag on the counter, and apologized to Shaky. Sorry, these are just my compensation. Shaky's eyes changed slightly when he looked at him, as if surprised. She just wanted to say something. Ron already opened the door and walked out of the tavern. 7. Rayleigh, wearing an old white coat, stood in the open space outside the tavern and stared at Ron in front of him. Boy, report your name. Ron. Rayleigh didn't have any impression of this name either, but after the imposing collision just now, he knew one thing. The appearance in front of him looks almost only 14 or 5-year-old black-haired boy, with amazing strength that is not suitable for his age. You just used the shave from Marine 6 Styles. What is your relationship with Marine? Why do you want to challenge me? The eyes under Rayleigh's glasses stared at Ron. It doesn't matter, it's just a few years as an intern in Marine. Ron looked at him and smiled. As for the reason for challenging you, Mr. Rayleigh, it can be said that it is just going along the way, or it can be said that I want to check my current strength by 20 or 20. Rayleigh smiled when he heard the words. Test your strength, interesting. Well, I will accept your challenge. Come on. Listening to Rayleigh's words, Ron didn't make a move, but turned his head and looked around. Although this tavern is a bit more remote, there are still residents not far from it. Rayleigh looked around and reacted quickly. Want to change place? Ron nodded. Sabayati Archipelago has no extra space. If you want to change places, I'm afraid you have to go to another island. Rayleigh looked at the sky, scratched his hair and said, it's a bit late tonight, how about tomorrow? Good. Time flies. It's the next day. Ron followed Rayleigh away from Sabayati Archipelago to a remote deserted island full of huge beasts. When the two entered the island, no beast dared to approach them. Their instincts reminded them that the danger of those two creatures was greater than that of any existence on this island. It seems that as soon as you get close to the two creatures, they will be torn to pieces. Ron followed Rayleigh to the belly of the island. Ron and Rayleigh stood opposite each other in the mountain clearing formed by huge trees, and they were more than 20 meters apart. Come on, let me see your strength. Rayleigh looked at Ron. Ron was also welcome. He kicked his feet and his body instantly disappeared in place, while a sunken pit appeared on the ground under his feet. Oh, a look of surprise flashed in Rayleigh's eyes. The next moment, accompanied by the roaring sound of a strong wind, it brought up layers of phantoms, and the extremely fierce whip leg slammed into Rayleigh from the side. Rayleigh, who turned on observation hockey, lifted his upper body backwards, avoiding this extremely domineering and fierce whip kick. Watching the sharp wind brought by the whip leg flew from the tip of his nose like a slash. Rayleigh's eyes became slightly more serious. Before the next blow came, Rayleigh raised a punch and slapped in the direction of the attack. Boom! The two fists collided. The aura of the two also collided. In an instant, lightning flashed in the air, and the violent wind rapidly revolved around the two of them, like a hurricane rising from the ground. Focusing on the two of them, the soil on the ground was blown by the violent air waves visible to the naked eye and cracked in layers. The huge trees on the outer layer shook violently, and the leaves and grass clippings were flying. The entire mountain forest was alarmed. And this is just the beginning. Each subsequent collision is heavier than the first hit. The two people flickered in the mountains and forests formed by huge trees. Every collision would shake the mountains and the forest. One after another, the huge trees that were affected by the two attacks fell to the ground one by one. The giant beasts in the forest fled in all directions with fear, staying away from the central area. Boom! Ron was thrown out with a punch by Rayleigh, who had taken off his jacket. He flew out 100 meters, and broke an unknown number of giant trees along the way, and finally fell into a mountain wall. Can the power of chi and blood alone reach this point? As expected of Pluton Rayleigh. Ron pulled himself out of the mountain wall, touched his chest, and grinned at the figure galloping towards him. His eyes are full of fiery fighting spirit. Immediately he stepped on his feet and met Rayleigh, who was galloping. The appetizer is over, next is dinner time. Armed. Accompanied by Hockey's hardening sound, Ron's right arm instantly became as black as steel. Armament Hockey, who has now reached LV5, instantly increased the power of Ron's punch by nearly 10 times. Even Armament Hockey. A shock flashed across Rayleigh's eyes. But as he watched the fist entwining Armament Hockey getting closer, he couldn't help thinking. With a thought, a stronger and terrifying Armament Hockey than Ron LV5's Armament Hockey wrapped around his fist, and it didn't even harden. Boom! A black fist hardened with an armed color collided with a fist that had only wrapped Armament Hockey. The ground under the two of them shattered in an instant, and the huge tree within 100 meters of it broke off in an instant. A wave of terrifying air that was 10 times more violent than before, accompanied by a heat wave created by the collision of the two Hockey, rushed out all around. Boom! A huge tree broke off toward the outer circle, and some of the soil under the huge tree close to the two of them was blown away layer by layer, exposing the bare roots, and then they were blown out together with the roots. Wait until Yue disperses. A clearing appeared in the lush mountain forest formed by huge trees. The center of the clearing was a large circular pit with a radius of tens of meters and a depth of several meters. Rayleigh was standing in the center of the pit, while Ron was nearly 10 meters away. There were 2 long scratches between the two, which were left by Ron being repelled. Ron's right arm was trembling, but he didn't care, his eyes fixed on Rayleigh. His eyes were full of fiery fighting spirit with no concealment of depression, eager excitement. Come again. He stepped on the ground fell apart, and the shaved Ron appeared in front of Rayleigh. The strengthened kick of the armed color swept towards him. Rayleigh, who turned on observation hockey, was about to fight back, but suddenly felt a sense of being spied on. His eyes condensed and his figure flashed back, avoiding the blow instantly, and at the same time, distanced himself from Ron. That strange feeling is. Rayleigh stared at Ron. What happened to the strange feeling that was completely seen through the perspective just now? Not like observation hockey. Is it fruit power? Rayleigh naturally didn't know Ron had the ability to see through the world, but he still noticed the anomaly. Is this the fighting instinct of the top powerhouse? Ron grinned. He no longer deliberately suppressed the scope, and directly released and opened the LV3 level observation hockey and the transparent world. As if a field of space opened up from him, covering the surroundings silently, all the details of everything in the space were presented in front of Ron in a slow manner, including Rayleigh, who was enveloped by this field, his body's breath. The blood flow, heartbeat, and muscle movement were all captured by Ron. It's this strange feeling again. Is it really fruit power? Rayleigh, who felt instinctively being spied, squinted. Looking at the distance, Ron's figure flashed. Rayleigh no longer suppressed, closing his eyes, his own super-strong observation hockey was also fully released. Where? The corners of Rayleigh's mouth raised slightly. Then one side of the body shape. Next second, Ron smashed it down from the top. Stepped out of space. The ground with a radius of more than 10 meters suddenly sank, and then cracked from the center to the surroundings. A huge amount of smoke drifted up all over the sky. In that smoke and dust, the 2 figures in the huge round pit kept flickering. The attacking party cannot touch the evading party, and the result is that all the attacks fall into the empty space. The earth shook again and again, and the entire ground of the round pit became larger and deeper under this attack, and it was even more messy. After Ron failed another attack. Does your strength end here, kid? Rayleigh's voice rang in Ron's ears. His eyes condensed, and the transparent world fed back many details into his mind. Without hesitation, he immediately stretched out his hand and clenched his fist and blasted to the side. But the power and speed of that attack increased in an instant, beyond his perception. Just like Garp and Impel Down, he predicted Ron's movements with a higher level of observation hockey, and at a faster speed, seized the opportunity. The foot passed under Ron's fist and fell to Ron's abdomen from bottom to top, kicking him up to the sky with a leaning line. Cough. Ron coughed out bitter water in the air, then fell straight to the ground like a meteorite. Rayleigh retracted his raised foot. He looked at the figure that was falling straight down. His eyes under his glasses were quite curious and surprised. Where did such a young man emerge from? Why have you never heard of him in the ocean before? It stands to reason that with his strength and age, he should have been famous for a long time. Watching the black-haired boy who had been hit by himself slowly climbed up from the ground, patted the dust on his body, his face looked indifferent. Rayleigh was a little shocked. Why does a teenager have such a physique, such a degree of armament hockey and observation hockey? He could not understand, because this is too incredible, beyond his knowledge. Over the past few decades, he has known and seen the top powerhouses on this sea. At the age of this young boy, there is absolutely no one who can reach this pervert level. Except for the Big Mom who was born to be a monster. Could it be that this kid is the same as her? Is the natural physique powerful and abnormal? After Ron stood up, he took a deep breath, then kicked his feet close to the ground, and rushed to Rayleigh very quickly. A punch went to his face. But he stopped in front of Rayleigh's face, and the strong fist wind blew Rayleigh's long silver curly hair straight back. Don't fight anymore. Ron frowned. Stop fighting, old man, I'm not as energetic as you young people. Rayleigh looked at Ron, whose clothes were torn and ragged and dusty. And I don't plan to get my clothes dirty, I have to wash myself again later. As Rayleigh said, he turned around and walked out of the pit where the 2 of them were. Ron didn't enjoy playing games a bit though. But since Rayleigh didn't intend to continue, he had to give it up. He dissipated the entangled armament hockey and walked out of the pit with Rayleigh. Both their coats were blown away. When looking for a coat, Ron asked Rayleigh in front of him, "When you were fighting me just now, what percentage did you use, Mr. Rayleigh? Is there a percentage?" He can feel that Rayleigh's vitality is definitely more than twice what he is now, and both armament hockey and observation hockey are much higher than him now. Although he still has swordsmanship that he has not taken out, the swordsmanship of the Pluton Rayleigh in front of him is probably better than himself. As for why he was able to fight back and forth with himself several times, it goes without saying that he naturally released the water. No, it released the sea. When he heard what he said, the corners of Rayleigh's eyes twitched slightly. 10%. Do you overestimate the old man or underestimate yourself too? Don't you know how strong you are? 10% of Lousie's peak was about the same. Rayleigh didn't know. Ron came to challenge him precisely because he didn't know. In the 2 years since he was an intern at Marineford, he and Garp have met several times, not even once, and the Marine generals have never played against him. Even the flying squirrel is avoiding him. I have fought against Hina a few times, but her strength is still too weak. Ron really can't be interested, so he can barely control the strength to be similar to hers. The only time that was considered a formal match was a swordsmanship contest with Mamasagi Gion. In that competition, another accident happened. Rayleigh found his white jacket and asked Ron when he bent over to pick it up. "Boy, who taught you your hockey?" "Garp." Rayleigh's eyes condensed slightly and looked at him. "So you are Garp's disciple?" "No, he only taught me how to practice armament hockey because of one condition." Ron told the truth. Rayleigh nodded and stopped talking. While Rayleigh was rowing a boat to take Ron back to Sabayati Archipelago, Rayleigh looked at Ron and said, "What are you going to do next? Since you don't plan to become Marine, do you want to be a pirate?" "I think I will probably become a traveler who travels around the sea," Ron said casually with his hands resting on the back of his head, lying on the boat, eyes closed, enjoying the sea breeze. "Traveler." Rayleigh looked at Ron, who was full of enjoyment, and some old days could not help but appear in his eyes. "When I first went to sea with the guy named Roger, didn't they just look like travelers?" After returning to his senses, Rayleigh looked at Ron and smiled. Whether it is a pirate, an adventurer, or a traveler, in essence, they are all guys pursuing freedom in this sea. And now this sea is not free. If you want to pursue freedom, you must break some of the things that bind this sea. Ron's heart moved slightly, and he opened his eyes and looked at Rayleigh. If you want to be a true traveler, you will inevitably be opposed to the person who creates this bondage. Whether you want it or not, this is the case in this era. Not everyone who yearns for freedom will become a pirate, but contrary to restraint and rules, those who resist restraint will be called pirates. Rayleigh, who was paddling the oars in both hands, looked at Ron and laughed happily. "If your purpose is really to travel on a truly free sea, then I will be waiting for you on the island of Sabayati when the sea is famous." After returning to Sabayati Archipelago, in the tavern, Ron and Rayleigh had a drink and asked him some questions about hockey by the way. Rayleigh drank the Sabayati he had invited and answered his questions very readily. "In my opinion, hockey's words, whether it is armament hockey, observation hockey, conqueror's hockey, have almost 4 stages. Your current armament hockey has probably reached the 2nd stage, and observation hockey is still in the 1st stage. Armament hockey is entangled in the 1st stage and hardened in the 2nd stage. To reach the 3rd stage, hockey must flow freely in the body." I heard a partner from Wanokuni on the ship said that in their country, hockey's power is called emission. I don't think it is accurate enough to call hockey by this name, but it is very appropriate to call hockey the 3rd stage. Rayleigh drank and said, "Armament hockey can reach the state of emission. Not many people have reached this stage in the entire ocean. As for the 4th stage, only a few people have reached this stage in the entire ocean." "Mr. Rayleigh, have you reached stage 4? Ron asked curiously. Rayleigh shook his head. "No, but I know someone has reached it." "Who?" "The one who taught you the hockey practice." "Garp." "Yeah." Rayleigh nodded. "If he was at his peak, he should have reached that level. One Piece Roger hasn't reached it." Ron was surprised. Rayleigh shook his head. "Roger and Garp have played many times." Roger's strength is observation hockey, while armament hockey is GARP stronger. I see. Ron nodded slightly, raised his head and drank the wine in his glass, then turned to look at Rayleigh beside him curiously. Observation hockey. Has anyone reached the 4th stage? I have no idea. Rayleigh picked up the bottle and poured it into the glass, and said, I have never heard of it, and I have never seen it. Observation hockey has reached the 3rd stage and can even predict the future. As for the 4th stage, I can't imagine it. But if Roger is still alive, he should have a chance to reach that level, right? Rayleigh lowered his head and looked at the bubbling Sabayati in the glass and laughed softly. After all, that guy's observation hockey is so different. It's normal. Ron knew what Rayleigh meant. One Piece Gore D. Roger, his master is the highest level observation hockey, who has the ability to listen to the sound of everything. Observation hockey, where most people are awakened, may focus on depth, such as Charlotte Curry, a corner of the foreseeable future. Or focus on breadth. For example, Sky Island can monitor the entire island's Enel with a hard network. Almost most people's awakening experiences have one of these two characteristics. Ron's awakening observation hockey is the same, focusing on depth, but it is far from reaching the state of Curry. The highest level observation hockey, on the basis of both these two characteristics, also has the ability to listen to the sound of everything. There are far fewer people with this ability in the entire pirate world than Master Conqueror's hockey. It can be said that there is hardly one out of hundreds of millions of people. But Ron was a little curious. Is his ability to see through the world and listen to the sound of all things, which one is stronger or weaker? After bidding farewell to Rayleigh, Ron took a merchant ship and left Sabayati Archipelago. Ron, wearing a military green trench coat, was standing at the deck railing, looking at the seabirds flying in the sky. The words Rayleigh said involuntarily sounded in his mind. Anyone who yearns for freedom and fights against bondage will be called a pirate in this era. He was thoughtful. What he thought before was to strengthen himself in this chaotic world of pirates of good and evil, not to fall into the struggle of all parties, and pursue freedom and a better life in this wonderful pirate world as he pleased. It seems that this goal now seems a bit too simple. Ron put his chin on his arms lying on the railing, and his clear black eyes looked at the sea in front of him with a trace of contemplation. The fishy sea breeze gently blew his soft black hair. Diaresis, sure enough, we should see the world more clearly. Suddenly he noticed that someone was watching him. Turned his head to look. On the deck railing beside him, beside a noble lady wearing a hat, two beautifully dressed twin girls with princess dresses and short orange-red hair were peeking at him. See Ron look over. The two little girls looked away, blushing, shyly shrunk behind the noble lady's skirt. Ron looked at them and smiled, with a gentle smile. There are many beautiful things in this pirate world. Shakis ripped off inside the bar. Rayleigh picked up the glass and watched the ice in the glass hit the wall of the glass, making a crisp sound. Shaki looked at him smoking a cigarette and asked, "What did you tell him when you sent him away just now?" "Nothing. Just ask him if he used all his strength when challenging me." "Then what?" Shaki is a little curious. He shook his head. Rayleigh watched the bubbles emerging from the wine glass, eyes full of emotion. "Call." Shaki spit out his cigarette. "It's really an invisible little guy. It's been a long time since I saw a young man like this." "Ha ha." Rayleigh laughed and drank Sabayati in his glass. "This sea is going to be lively again. That kid will definitely cause a lot of trouble when he goes out to sea this time. Shaki, next time I see that kid, his name will surely resound in the sea, and maybe he will become a famous big pirate, ha ha ha." Shaki glanced at Rayleigh. "You seem to want him to be a pirate." Rayleigh poured the wine and shook his head slightly. "It's not that I think, but in this era, pure adventurers who pursue freedom are no longer allowed." Shaki smoked and said nothing. Host, Ron. Age, 14. Blood value, 1536. Sun breathing method master degree 100%. Transparent world LV3. Kendo. Realm of slashing iron, first entry. Weapon, 21 great knife rakieri. Permanent buff thousands of tempers no true meaning binding. Armament Hakil 5. Observation Hakil 3. Conquerors Hakil 0. Shaving, LV6. Moonwalk, LV5. Tempest Kick, LV5. Special skills, Mechanical Grandmaster, Navigation Grandmaster, Language Grandmaster, Healing. Special Treasure. The Treasure of the King. In the past 2.5 years, Ron has signed dozens of islands with the warship Out of the Sea, most of which only rewarded 10 points of vitality. The rest of the rewards were very few, and some were of no use. Special Treasures, Treasures of the King, and Healing Techniques. Ron is quite satisfied among them. Ron, who was sitting in the room, slowly opened his eyes, and with a thought, the famous sword Reikiri slowly emerged from the void behind him, hovering with the tip of the knife down by his hand. Then, following Ron's heart, he gradually fell into the void like the surface of water. His king's treasure is not connected to the gold treasure vault, but his system space. The ability of this treasure is actually dispensable for Ron who has the system, but it is more handsome in form. This is enough. Ron looked out the window, white clouds, blue sky and sea forming a harmonious picture. According to what Rayleigh said, my current strength should be considered good on the Grand Line, provided that I don't encounter some tricky demon fruit power. Ron thought to himself, as for New World, don't consider going there for the time being, just stroll around on the Grand Line, and inquire about Sabo by the way. He also inquired about Sabo when he was in Marineford, the headquarters of Marine, but he found nothing. I just came up in a hurry, I don't know where this ship will go. Ron looked out the window and thought to himself. With a thought to him, a curtain of light that only he could see appeared before his eyes. It is a chart of the entire ocean, with a red dot on it, representing where he is now. Sabayati Archipelago can be regarded as the end of the first half of the Grand Line. To go from Sabayati Archipelago to the second half of the Grand Line, which is New World, you have to go through the Fishmen Island on the seabed or across the Red Line and pass through the Holy Land Mariajoy. Ron watched the slowly moving red dots on the map, and could roughly tell that the merchant ship was heading in the opposite direction to New World. Not far away is the famous Devil's Triangle. The white mist has shrouded the sea surface over the years, as if covering the sea with a veil of mystery. It is said that more than 100 pirate ships here will disappear into the fog of this sea area every year. It is said that there are also mysterious and strange giant creatures inside, which is an area full of danger. Ron also saw a somewhat familiar name on the chart displayed on the light screen in front of him. Ghost Island, which is the thriller bark of Moria. To the southwest, it's about 360 miles away from here, and it's constantly moving. Ron pinched his chin and thought with interest. Okay. Ron's eyes suddenly narrowed slightly. He turned his head and looked out the window. Next second, accompanied by the roar of a bomb explosion. The window glass in Ron's room was shattered, and the whole ship shook slightly. A panic-stricken shout came from outside the room. Ron thought for a while, picked up the coat and trench coat that was set aside, opened the door and walked out. Come to the deck. The Marine who was guarding the ship had already faced off with a group of fierce pirates. Behind Marine was a panic-faced passenger. Among them, the two twin girls who had peeped at Ron cringed and were embraced by the noble lady wearing a hat, and their big eyes were full of panic and fear. They are the Dessa pirates. A passenger panicked. They're Captain Dessa Hills, but a pirate offering a reward of 45 million. Why would such a pirate target such a merchant ship? Because our boss saw a devil fruit in Sabayati Archipelago, which just happens to be short of money. A pirate who carried a broadsword over 2 meters on his shoulder stepped forward. It's the deputy captain of the Dessa pirates, the blood knife hands are scattered. Someone recognized the person and said with a trembling voice. A bounty. 0.27 million. The mass nicknamed Blood Swordsman heard the man's words, stretched out his tongue, licked his lips, and gave a grin. Our captain is still waiting for us on the island, so he can't let him wait for a long time. Get on it to me and take all their belongings to me. Ha Gia, understand. The pirate behind him gave a weird smile and approached the frightened passengers with a weapon. In front of dozens of Marines, the lieutenant junior grade wearing a justice coat and a Marine hat clenched his fists and stared at the mass of the blood knife hand. Blood Swordsman mass, you never want to succeed today. Raise a gun. He gave an order, and the Marines raised their palm guns and aimed them at the mass of the blood knife and the fearless pirates around him. With this kind of thing, you can't defeat me, the Blood Swordsman said with a grinning mass, and then rushed forward. Shot. Bang bang bang. The lead bullet flew out, but all the long knives that were swung by the blood hand knife mass slammed in the air. He rushed to the lieutenant junior grade and swiped it. The long-barreled guns in the hands of him and several Marines around him were all cut off. The lieutenant junior grade gritted his teeth and hit him with a fist. Too slow. Is this Marine? The blood saber mass dodges his attack extremely fast, and arrogantly laughed, "Go to hell." The big knife in his hand flashed with a trace of blood, passing behind the Marine lieutenant junior grade, and blood spurted out instantly. Everyone was frightened, and some women even covered their mouths with their hands to avoid screaming. Waste. Mass stomped on the head of the fallen Marine lieutenant junior grade, and then turned his head to the band of pirates who were holding weapons, fierce, grinning and arrogant, said, "Come on, dare to value this ship before Marine support arrives. Take everything from me back." Hee hee, great, I'm on it. Ha gia gia, cuckoo, can these Marines be killed? Whatever. Sizzle, 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 hee hee, hee hee. The group of pirates rushed up from mass with strange noises. Some went to deal with the remaining Marine, while others rushed towards the panic and fearful ship passengers with sullen smiles. For a time, the whole ship was in chaos. Seeing Marine being suppressed and killed by the pirates one by one, the hearts of those boat passengers gradually fell to the bottom, and their faces appeared desperate. Looking at their desperate eyes, the mass of the blood swordsmen was extremely enjoyable. Despair and fear are the correct attitude that the weak should present in front of the strong. "Oh, isn't there a wonderful woman here, sizzle?" A pirate with a greedy face walked towards the good-looking and temperamental noble lady and the two little girls beside her. "Mother, my lord mother." The two little girls looked at the approaching pirate with great fear, tears in their eyes, just grabbing the noble lady's clothes. "It's still a mother and daughter, sizzling, sizzling, I'm very lucky today." The pirate licked his lips and grabbed it greedily. The noble lady guarded the two little girls back in panic, and quickly retreated. She looked around and anxiously called for help. "Is there anyone? Please help us, please help us." But, where is anyone? Everyone is desperate to save their lives. Her eyes gradually turned into despair. Just when the greedy pirate reached out to them and was about to catch them. Boom! A gunshot sounded from the chaotic ship. How come? The pirate who was about to reach out to the noble lady stared wide, and blood ran down his forehead. Chapter 51. The boat fell silent because of the gunshot. The noble lady stared blankly at the big hole in his forehead, and he fell down like this, and she couldn't believe it. After all, who is it? Who? The blood swordsman frowned and looked around. The pirates around also stopped and looked around. Soon, everyone's eyes fell on the black-haired teenager in a military green trench coat at the railing on the side of the deck. His left hand was in his pocket, and his right hand was holding a silver revolver with green smoke from the muzzle. "Ah, Ashley, look, it's that brother." Seeing Ron, the sister of the twins opened her big tearful eyes slightly, and said in surprise and excitement. With a rounder face, the younger sister with a little fat baby wiped her tears, looked over there, and when she saw the figure clearly, a ray of light appeared in her eyes. Court death. The two pirates who were not far from Ron looked at Ron who was facing them a few meters away. The evil began in their hearts. They immediately waved their weapons and slashed at him from behind him. Ron didn't even look at it, but he shot two more shots when he raised his hand. Bang bang, kang dang. The weapons in the hands of the two vicious pirates fell to the ground, and the two men whose foreheads were penetrated shook their bodies twice, and then fell straight and could not die again. The blood knife hand squinted at Mass, and walked towards it carrying the big knife. "Boy, what's your name?" No answer. It's just that the silver revolver with green smoke in the dark-haired boy lifted up and aimed at him. "This weapon, do you think it can be against me?" Mass smiled coldly, stepped on her feet, and rushed towards the black-haired boy with murderous intent. The calm black-haired teenager pulled the trigger. Boom! A silver bullet pierced the air at a very fast speed, like a silver light, shooting towards the mass that was coming in. The destination is his forehead. Can't avoid it. Mass opened my eyes wide, and my heart shook slightly. But after all, he is a pirate who has offered a reward of 27 million and has seen death. With his eyes condensed, he raised the fine iron long knife in his hand, and was about to fly the silver bullet that was shot. He used to do this to deal with Marines' lead bullets. But when the blade touched that silver bullet, it was only at Mass that he discovered how naive his thoughts were. The big sword made of fine iron was instantly pierced by the silver bullet entwining armament hockey, and in his horrified gaze, it penetrated his forehead. Crackling, a long knife with a hole in his hand fell, and then in the dull eyes of everyone, the deputy captain of the Dessa pirates, who is known as the Blood Knife Hand on the Grand Line, is offering a reward of 27 million. After shaking, he fell straight forward in front of the black-haired teenager, and the blood slowly flowed out. No, it won't be. The deputy captain is dead. The remaining pirates were shocked, their voices trembling. The boat passengers and the noble lady around were also staring at the very young black-haired boy. In the eyes of everyone, the black-haired teenager released the hand holding the silver revolver and let it fall, but it did not fall to the ground as everyone thought, but slowly disappeared like water. In the void. Evil, demon fruit power. The pirate said in horror. The other pirates who heard his words couldn't help but step back, trying to stay away from the mysterious and dangerous guy. Ron bent down and picked up the 2-meter-long knife on the ground. It originally belonged to the mass of the blood swordsman, but since he has fallen into eternal sleep in a pool of blood, it is not rude to borrow it by himself. Looking at the beautiful black hair, young and easy to lift, the 2-meter-long fine iron sword, the boat passengers became more and more shocked, but the pirates trembled. Quick, run away. We are not this guy's opponent. Quick. They hurriedly dropped the money and treasure in their hands, ignoring their weapons, and rushed towards their pirate ship. Want to leave now? Ron stepped on his feet and quickly caught up with the pirates. In their horrified gazes, Ron raised the 2-meter-long knife in his hand and slashed it a few times at random. Several slender, aqua-blue slashes passed through the bodies of these pirates. 2 seconds later, the weapons in the hands of the 20 or 30 pirates who stood there stiffly were shredded at the same time, and blood spurted out of them at the same time, making the scene quite spectacular. The noble lady came back to her senses and hurriedly blocked the eyes of the 2 daughters beside her with her hands. The boat passengers and the surviving Marines were all stared at, looking at the dark-haired boy who was holding a big knife and walking towards the pirate ship with his back turned to them. His heart was shocked. In addition to the shock, there is also a deep awe. Ron fell from the merchant ship to the pirate ship. The pirates looked at him in horror, shaking their arms in their hands, not knowing whether to fight with him or jump into the sea quickly and escape. Ron flicked the broad knife in his hand casually. A straight and slender aqua-blue slash passed across the air, and the flag representing the Dessa pirate ship broke off. I want this ship, Ron, holding the big knife, said as he walked towards the pirates. Following his approach, the psychological defenses of those pirates were completely destroyed, and under extreme fear and panic, they made the wrong choice. Go to hell. The group of pirates raised their muskets and fired frantically at the mysterious young man wearing a military green trench coat. But seeing that the guy walking towards them turned his head or turned sideways at will, he avoided all attacks very calmly. Why can't you hit it? A pirate put down the musket with blue smoke in his hand, and shouted at that figure with a desperate face. No one can answer him. The dull black-haired teenager raised his long knife in their desperate eyes. No, do not want. Accompanied by the sound of several slashing through the air. Under the violent sword wind, these pirates were knocked out from the ship one by one, and plunged into the sea in a parabolic manner. Afterwards, this pirate ship slowly sailed into the distance under the grateful and awe-inspiring gazes of the merchant ship passengers and the surviving Marine under Ron Master, who had acquired the skills of the Grand Master. Looking at the departing pirate ship, one of the twin girls raised their heads and asked the noble lady innocently. Mother, did that brother save us? Well, he is our savior. The noble lady looked at the distant ship with gratitude in her eyes. Mother, what's his name? Can we see him again in the future? The little girl asked innocently. The noble lady squatted down and put the 2 daughters in her arms, her eyes gentle. Yes, I will definitely see them in the future. Such a strong and gentle person will certainly not remain silent on the sea. After half a month, Ron drove the pirate ship alone and came to the Devil's Triangle covered by dense fog. The place was shrouded in thick fog and couldn't tell the direction. It was troublesome for ordinary navigators, but it was not a problem for Ron. He could clearly see the movement of the island-like giant ship from the chart in the light curtain. At the speed of this pirate ship, it shouldn't take too long to catch up with that thriller bark. On this day, thick fog rose on the sea. The ship was traveling in it, and couldn't tell the direction at all. Pirates on board. Ron was lying on the deck chair, drinking juice, reading a book in his hand. All the pirates on this ship were wiped out by him, so the 3 large amounts of money and treasure that the ship had collected for its captain Dessa to purchase devil fruit and the food weapons capable of supplying many pirates all fell into Ron's hands. From these treasure weapons, Ron also found something interesting. For example, the devil fruit illustrated book in his hand. He saw a lot of familiar devil fruit on it. For example, Paramesha rubber fruit, string fruit, Logia mara fruit, smoke fruit, etc. Devil fruit. Ron looked at the devil fruit in the album and thought to himself, if there is a suitable and powerful fruit, should I also eat one? He turned his head to the left. Yo-ho-ho-ho, yo-ho-ho-ho. Accompanied by the cheerful rhythm of singing, the shadow of a big ship appeared on the sea covered in mist. It was a dead old ghost ship. Yo-ho-ho-ho-ho. Ron looked at the afro-headed skull sings drunkly with the violin on the ship, and there was an accident in his eyes. I didn't expect to encounter it, the capable person of Wonkwan fruit, a member of the protagonist group in the future, the explosive skull Brook. Ron closed the devil fruit picture book in his hand, stood up, looked at the ship, with a smile on his face. Now that you happen to meet it, let's see it in the past. He put down the demon illustration book in his hand. The thick sheepskin book sank into the void and disappeared. Ron's foot was a little bit, and his figure lightly and quickly jumped into the air, cast moonwalk, and quickly boarded the ghost ship. Brook heard the sound of leather boots touching the floor behind him, stopped playing, and turned his head to look. A black-haired teenager wearing black trousers and a white short-sleeved hooded sweater put his hands in his sweater pockets and looked at him with a smile. Hello. Ha. Brook froze for a moment. Then he looked at Ron, surprised and excited. Living people. Really living people. Yoo-ho-ho-ho, this really scares me. Ron looked at the explosive skull frame in front of him who was still talking, and felt once again in his heart that devil fruit is so powerful that Yamato is incredible. Yo-ho-ho-ho-ho, handsome boy, do you want tea? Brook smiled at Ron. No, I brought some wine, do you want to drink it together? Be sure. On the misty sea, on the old deck of this ghastly ghost ship, a young and beautiful black-haired teenager and an explosive skull were sitting opposite each other, drinking wine, chatting, and laughing from time to time. No matter how you look at this scene, it's not normal. Ha, Ron, did you specifically come to find that ghost island? Brook held the wine saucer in his boneless hand. Good. Ron picked up the wine bottle and filled himself. Brook put down the wine saucer in his hand and looked directly at Ron with pitch-black eyes. I advise you not to go. Gecko Moria is very strong. I don't want to see you die in vain. Don't worry, I'm actually quite strong. Ron drank the wine in the saucer and smiled at Brook. Besides, even if I go, I won't necessarily conflict with that Gecko Moria. Really? That's good. Yo-ho-ho-ho-ho, this wine is really delicious. I haven't drunk this kind of wine for decades. Ha ha, then drink more. Yo-ho-ho-ho, then I'm not polite. Don't even look at me now that I don't even have a mouth, but I still drink a lot. Yo-ho-ho. Brook held the wine saucer and delivered it to his mouth. It stands to reason that the drink should have leaked from the bone shelf, but in fact it did not. Even if Ron used to see through the world, he couldn't find the place for those drinks. And he will really get drunk, obviously just a skeleton. It can only be said that the ability of devil fruit in this world is really incredible, distorting common sense. Ron and Brook drank the fine wine they bought from Subayati Island, and talked about the things outside now. When they were enjoying themselves, Brook also picked up the violin next to them and played the song, Bink's Fine Wine. After listening to the song, after drinking, Ron got up and left. Is it going to leave already? Brook was a little bit upset. Ron looked at Brook, who was a little bit dissatisfied, and smiled. In my hometown, there is a saying that there are no banquets in the world, and there is also a saying, where do you never meet in life, Brook? In a short while, I believe you will meet the best companion for you, and then drink at the bar on the sea. Looking at the departing ship, the gloomy light in Brook, who was standing on the deck with the violin, flickered like a soul. Companion, yo-ho-ho-ho-ho, it's a remote and beautiful word, Mr. Ron, thank you. Even his soul is full of yearning for this word. A few days later, Ron found the thriller bark nicknamed Ghost Island. When he approached the huge ship hiding in the mist, the people in the huge ship also found him. A little ghost came to the boat silently and watched Ron from the dark. Ron, who was lying on the chair and continuing to check the devil's picture book, glanced sideways and didn't care. On the thriller bark, a girl with a pink double ponytail, a crown, and a burgundy umbrella in her hand stared at the pirate ship approaching the giant ship, with some doubts on her face. Only one person. She detected this information through the ghost clone that was released. It doesn't matter, eat it first. Soon, Thriller Bark's mouth opened, and the pirate ship was swallowed in silently. Dip, check the location of the host ghost island, and meet the sign-in conditions. Do you sign in? Coming. Ron closed the demon book in his hand. Check in. Sign in is successful. Get a sign-in reward. Blood value +10. Get the sign-in reward. Kill kick, sublimation nuclear kick, current level LV1. Quote. Quote. Ron was really taken aback when he heard the reward. But immediately, an overbearing and hot inexplicable force rushed into his right leg, rapidly strengthening the muscles and bones of his right leg. If Ron can look inside, he can see the calf bone of his right leg turning into a golden color at a speed visible to the naked eye, just like gold forging, indestructible. A huge amount of information about this kill skill also flooded into Ron's mind. After a sharp tear in the right leg and a burst of pain in the brain, Ron finally opened his eyes and looked down at his right leg that seemed to be flooded with golden lightning, his eyes full of surprise and excitement. Sublimation nuclear kick. Kill kick, which can gather the whole body's power on the right foot, fall from the sky like a meteor, and burst out the ultimate destructive power. Current level. LV1. Destructive power increase. 100%. Now it's just LV1, can it double the destructive power? Ron cast his gaze on the thriller bark, the huge island-like ship in front of him, with excitement and curiosity in his eyes. He is now twice the ultimate destructive power. To what extent can he reach? Just try it out here. Before the pirate ship came to shore, Ron stepped on his feet, and his whole body rose up into the sky like an arrow from the string, fast speeding into a black shadow. Without waiting to stop, he stepped in midair with his strengthened right leg and used moonwalk to explode his astonishing foot power, causing him to rush to a higher place at a faster speed. That guy can actually fly. Perona caught the ghost clone's perspective and saw this scene, couldn't help but feel a little confused. What does he want to do? Although he didn't know what that guy wanted to do, Perona had an inexplicable premonition in her heart. She immediately retracted the ghost clone and floated to find Moria. Standing high in the sky, Ron's heart moved slightly, and there were golden lightning flashes on his right leg, and all the blood in his body surged toward his right leg. Breath of the sun, full focus. Plus armament hockey. Hardening. Suddenly, the hot air wave visible to the naked eye spread out from under his right foot to the surroundings. At this moment, you don't need to use moonwalk. Ron can hover in the sky, which shows the strength of this foot. He was standing at a very high altitude, looking across the dense fog, looking at the thriller bark the size of a grain of rice below. A flash of heat and excitement flashed in his eyes. Can this blow smash this huge ship? In the ghastly fortress on the ghost island, Gecko Moria is watching Hakubik turn the corpse he sent back into a zombie. Hehehehe, if this goes on, I will soon have a huge and immortal zombie army. Moria laughed very proudly. Kaido, waiting for me, I will find you to take revenge. Hehehehe. Master Moria. Perona flew in here and saw Moria face surprise. It's Perona, what's the matter? Moria is very good to Perona, who was adopted and grown up by him. There seems to be something wrong outside. A guy from outside flew over our island. Would you like to check it out? Perona said. Huh, flew above us. What nonsense are you talking about? Moria is a little unclear. Perona just wanted to say something. Suddenly, an astonishingly heavy power descended from the sky, and the air instantly became extremely viscous, and even Perona floating in the air couldn't help but sink. What's wrong? Hakubik, who was turning the corpse into a zombie, couldn't help but raise his head. Moria's expression also became extremely solemn. He immediately rushed out of the house and came outside. Perona followed him closely, and when he saw the golden meteor that crossed the sky in midair, bringing up a straight flame, leaning a line towards the ghost island, Perona looked at the golden meteor. His eyes widened instantly. What is that? Moria could not answer her. Because he doesn't know. He only knows one thing at the moment. That attack, he could never stop it. But fortunately, the location of the golden shooting star does not seem to be here. Under the gaze of Gecko Moria and Perona, the golden meteor that rubbed against the air and ignited the flame cut through the thick fog, and fell from the high altitude with a slanting line. The air became thick and heavy. Under the pressure of that extremely heavy aura, the bodies of the zombies on the Ghost Island are creaking, almost crushed. This. Moria stared at the fast-falling golden meteor, her tall and weird body trembled slightly, with a trace of horror on her face. This feeling, so familiar. It's exactly the same as when I faced the monster Kaido in Wano Kuni back then. In Perona's horrified eyes, the golden meteor that pierced the sky from a very high altitude landed on the southeast area of Thriller Bark with an incredibly terrifying momentum. After the golden meteor hit the ground, there was a silence between heaven and earth. Immediately, boom, this huge ship floating on the sea, like a small island, shook violently, the southeast area sank downwards, the entire huge ship tilted towards the southeast area, and the surrounding sea raised huge waves. At the same time, an extremely terrifying shock wave spread from the center to the surroundings, and the ground with the southeast area as the center began to crack and shatter in large tracts outwards. The earth is shaking and the mountains are shaking. The ground of the Ghost Island rolled violently like a cow turned around. The buildings shook violently and began to collapse and collapse. The ground cracked and the sea water poured into the southeast. The huge sails above the island were torn apart by the violent shock waves, and the mountains and forests were torn apart. The shock wave moved flat, and many zombies were blown away. Under the shock wave, the huge fortress in the center shook violently, shattered and cracked, and lost countless rocks. Huge cracks spread to the surroundings along the southeast direction. Pieces of broken ground and forest fell into the sea along those cracks. The huge waves hit the surrounding walls, causing another round of shaking. The whole island is like the end of the day. What, Master Moria? Perona dodged in the air, panicking and avoiding the rubble. Moria stared at the southeast blankly. What to do? How does he know what to do? He didn't even know what was going on with this sudden attack. When the shock subsided, the southeast area of the Ghost Island no longer exists. The total area of the Ghost Island has lost a quarter, and there are several huge cracks extending from the southeast, almost dividing the Ghost Island into several parts. The fortress in the center collapsed nearly halfway, the mountains and forests were flattened, and the huge wall surrounding the city was hit by the shock wave and huge waves, causing a lot of damage. The entire Ghost Island became fragmented because of that blow. When Moria brought Perona, Absalom, the transparent ability fruit ability, and a kind of general zombie including sword hero Ryoma, rushed to the edge of the destroyed southeast area. They saw a very young black-haired teenager wearing black trousers and a white hoodie, slowly walking up from the huge hole that slowly rose out of the sea. There was still remaining golden lightning rustling on his right leg. Slightly missed, Ron said to himself. The strength is too concentrated, coupled with the first use of it, which makes it a little difficult to control. Next time, you can adjust your legs. That terrible attack just now. Is it from this boy? Moria was a little unimaginable. It's him, Moria-sama, I just saw him fly into the sky. Perona pointed at Ron and shouted. Now Moria had to believe it. Who are you, on Earth? Moria stared at the black-haired boy and asked, why attack us? Ron didn't look at him either, just looked at the swordsman Ryoma holding a black knife among the zombie generals. It's a test of tricks, it has nothing to do with you. Quote. Moria froze for a moment, then opened her mouth wide. Clam, because of this, you are going to destroy my ship. You destroyed my ship and said it has nothing to do with me. Ron glanced at him and said, Gecko Moria, wouldn't you hunt the pirate ship you encountered? Moria stopped after hearing the words. Ron's calm gaze swept over all of them and the zombies, and finally fell on Moria's face. If you have any comments, I welcome you to shoot me. Hearing his arrogant words, Moria couldn't help it. Unforgivable. He let out a sharp roar, give me up. Absalom, who is capable of transparent fruit, disappears instantly. Some animal zombies with a huge system rushed towards Ron. Perona used the fruit power, and several ghost clones flew towards Ron. The general zombie Django Jigoro and Janao Ryoma shot at the same time, and 2 flying slashes slashed towards Ron. Ron stretched out his hand and drew the 21 skilled Reikiri from the void. ZZ. The golden thunder circulated on Reikiri's knife. Thunder's breath 6 type electric thunder and thunder. Ron used the swordsman's iron cutting realm to perform his sword moves. The power is more than 10 times greater than before. In an instant, countless golden thunder slashes slashed out around him, centered on him. The slashes of Janao Jigoro and Janao Ryoma were broken. Those animal zombies were instantly chopped into countless segments. Absalom, who was approaching invisibly, retreated in amazement, but still too late, was hit by a sword gas, and instantly his shoulders were cut open, and blood gushing out. Perona's ghost can ignore these physical slashes, but he cannot ignore the threat that Haki poses to her in these slashes. Immediately retreated, hovering to dodge these slashes. After dodge, her little face was full of horror and cold sweat. The huge, weird-looking Moria roared and immediately activated her abilities. Shadow Box. His shadow instantly turned into countless flying bats, surrounded by Ron. Ron stepped on his feet, his body disappeared instantly before appearing in front of him. What? Moria opened her eyes wide. Ron waved Reikiri calmly. But his slash slashed across Moria's body, without touching the entity. Shadow Warrior. Hehehehe. Moria, whose body and shadow exchanged positions, gave a triumphant smile. Your attack can't hit me. Go, I'll leave it to you. He fell silent. Jigoro and Ryoma attacked Ron from 2 directions at the same time. A flash of light flashed in Ron's eyes. Good job. Ron is holding Reikiri in his hand and is fighting fiercely with 2 former swordsmen. Reikiri's blade collided with the black sword Chushui, who also worked as a big sharp knife, making a clear sound. A series of flying slashes spread out from between the 3 people. Sword chi overflowed. The zombie animals around will be chopped into several pieces as soon as they approach. Levitating in the air, Perona took the opportunity to use the fruit ability, which made the guy fall into a negative state. But even in the battle with the 2 powerful zombie swordsmen, the black-haired teenager was able to dodge her ghost clone. When the black-haired boy glanced sideways at her in the air, Perona suddenly fell into an ice cave, and a chill spread in her heart. It seems that as long as she moves again, she will immediately be in a different place. She didn't dare to make any more small movements. Nose song sanding arrow tail slash. The swordsmanship performed by the Ryoma who put the corpse into Brooke's shadow is also Brooke's swordsmanship. It is not the true strength of this dragon swordsman at all. Diaresis, that's how it is. After Ron had almost figured out the limit they could reach now, he didn't keep his hands anymore. He held Reikiri in his hand, and the slashes he slashed became heavier and more arbitrary. Every slashing attack contains the true meaning of slashing iron. Reikiri collided with Kuroto Akimazu and the sword in Jigoro's hand. Kang! A sharp sword light flashed. The ground around it was cut vertically and horizontally in a cross shape. A building in front was swept by sword air, and the upper half fell slowly. The half of Jigoro's body and Ryoma's arm holding the black sword Chushui also slipped down with it. Yo-ho-ho-ho-ho. Beautiful swordsmanship. Ryoma's mouth made Brooke's voice, and a blue flame rose from the wound on his severed arm, and then quickly spread to his whole body. This knife, please. You roar. After speaking these last words, the corpses of Jigoro and Ryoma disappeared in the blue flame, and the 2 dark shadows moved towards the distance. Only the black knife Chushui on the ground was left. Ron bent down and picked up the extremely heavy and hard black knife Chushui. Is this a cut of Zoro's experience and equipment? Ron looked at the black knife Chushui in his hand and smiled. Chu Shui, holding the scabbard black sword in one hand, Ron, who was holding Reikiri in the other, glanced at Moria obliquely. Do you still want to fight? Moria gritted his teeth, a drop of cold sweat dripped from his forehead, and he took a step back in the eyes of the surrounding zombies and Perona praying. Good choice. Ron nodded, and then in the horrified gaze of Moria who gritted his teeth, Perona who was full of fear, and the surrounding zombies, he turned and left with 2 big sharp knives, 21 famous knives. When the pirate ship left from the entrance of the giant ship, only a ghost island that had almost collapsed was left behind. In the end, I don't even know who that guy is or what his name is. I can't even find a target for revenge. What a humiliation. Moria clenched her fists, gritted her teeth, and hated the sky. Even if the fruit is fully capable, plus all the people and zombies on this huge ship, I am afraid it is not the opponent of that monster. Definitely, we must quickly make Oz a zombie. Me, I must have the power of a master. Moria gritted her teeth. On the other side, after Ron had cut off the body of the swordsman Ryoma, Brooke on the ghost ship looked at the shadow on the ground and scratched the explosive head in confusion. My shadow, is back. Ron, who has obtained the Nirvana Sublimation Nuclear Kick and Sharp Knife 21 skill, leaves the Devil's Triangle area covered by dense sea fog. The next stop is the city of Seven Waters, which has been here once. He intends to repurchase a better ship there, as well as various furniture and mechanical equipment, and he intends to modify it himself. Came to the city of Seven Waters. Ron first spent 2 days in this water capital, buying a large amount of Plong wine, a variety of specialties, as well as some clothing and shoes. His squandering behavior of a young man alone also attracted the attention of some gangsters who coveted money. This day, Ron, wearing a long army green trench coat, walked out of the store carrying 2 large bags. A group of gangsters blocked his way. "Hey, boy, you seem to be quite rich, lend us some flowers." The headed man with flower arms put his hands in his pants kabuto, with a cigarette in his mouth, and raised his chin at Ron. The people around him flexed their hands, grinning and staring at the black-haired boy in front of him who looked far thinner and thinner than them. "What if I say no?" Ron looked at them and smiled. "You can try it." The leader vomited smoke. "Boss, what can I do with him? Let me dismantle him." The chubby man with a mace beside him grinned. Ron's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you doing?" A man with dissatisfaction sounded from behind. The gangsters turned their heads to look. After seeing the faces of the 2 men, the gangsters opened their eyes wide, and the smoke from the mouth of the headed man dropped even more. Barry, a blond man with goggles and a circle of scumbags, put his hands in his coat kabuto, with a cigar in his mouth, staring at the flower-armed man and said, "Flower Arm, you really don't have a long memory. Isn't the lesson learned last time enough?" The flower-armed man watched him with a cold sweat. Enough. Hurry up, then." The flower-armed man greeted his companion and fled away. The fat man gave Ron a vicious look when he passed by. Ron smiled. So courageous. The rare chance to survive is not known to cherish. Ron turned his head. His gaze fell on the man next to the blonde man. He was wearing a jumpsuit and a black top hat with a pigeon on his shoulder. It was Rob Lucci who came to the city of Seven Waters to perform hidden tasks and came to design drawings for Pluton. His eyes fixed on Ron, obviously recognizing him. Ron smiled at him slightly. Lucci's eyes condensed slightly. He turned his head and said to Barry beside him, "By the way, Barry, I suddenly remembered that there is still something to buy. You should go back first, and I will look for it again." "Okay." Barry nodded. Lucci turned and left, then turned left into an alley. He walked in the direction Ron was, and passed by him. When passing by, Barry reminded the bland-looking black-haired boy, "Remember to stay away from those people next time." Ron didn't say anything, just carried his things and stepped forward. When he reached the intersection of the alley and the street, as he expected, Rob Lucci was leaning against the wall of the alley with his arms folded, obviously waiting for him. "Marine recruits an intern. Ron, why are you here?" Lucci asked straightforwardly. "I am no longer an intern specially recruited by Marine." "What?" Lucci was startled. "Before answering your question, please accompany me to find the group of people just now," Ron said, walking past him. Lucci frowned and followed him. In the long alley, Ron walked in front, Lucci walked behind, gathering 5 or 6 paces away. "What did you mean by saying that you are no longer an intern specially recruited by Marine? You defected from Marine." "Defection. I have never joined Marine. It is a bit inappropriate to use the word defect to describe it." "Similar to me." Lucci stared at him sharply and said, "You haven't answered me yet. What are you doing here? Are you here to find me?" "You think too much. I'm not interested in what you do here to hide your identity, and," Ron said flatly, "so please put away your killing intent." While the two were talking, Ron already saw the gangsters just now. "Found it." The flower-armed man squatted down by the wall, and the little brother beside him touched him. "Boss, look." "What are you looking at?" "Don't bother, lousy. He's upset. The flower arm man said, annoyed. It's the kid just now. What? He turned his head and looked away. At a glance, he saw the black-haired teenager who was slowly approaching this side not far in front of the alley, wearing a military green long trench coat and carrying 2 large bags of things in his hands. The flower arm man couldn't help but was taken aback. It's really the kid just now. The fat man picked up the mace on the ground and stared at the black-haired boy who was slowly approaching. His face was full of excitement. I didn't expect the prey to be delivered to the door, luck. No one will help him this time. He smirked, picked up the mace and walked towards it. The flower-armed man has an inexplicable sense of inexplicability. George, wait, he hasn't spoken yet. A slender wind blade cut across the fat man's neck. The flower-armed man hasn't reacted yet. His head rolled down like a leather ball, a lot of blood spurted out, his body shook twice, and then fell forward under the horrified eyes of the gangsters and others. The black-haired boy calmly kicked a few wind blades towards them again. After several screams of despair, there was no more movement. Lu Chi behind Ron stared at him, eyes slightly solemn. One of the 6 types. Tempest kick, and the degree of master is very high. After Ron killed the gangsters who were looking for death, he turned to look at Lu Chi and said, I want a good boat. Do you have any good channels? It's better to have. What if I say no? Then I don't guarantee that your identity will be leaked out. Lu Chi squinted his eyes. Are you threatening me? Ron didn't answer, but his gaze fell on the pigeon called haughtily on Lu Chi's shoulder, and smiled. When we met last time, I said your pigeon should be roasted, it will be delicious. Quote. Lu Chi narrowed his eyes, stepped on his feet, his figure disappeared instantly, appeared in front of Ron, and swung a sharp whip to him. But it was empty. Shave. Lu Chi's pupils shrink slightly. Ron, who came to the place where he was originally, carried 2 large bags with his back to him and said, I advise you not to do it. Because if you do it, you must be the one who will die. Lu Chi slowly turned around and stared at his back. Oh, is it? His figure began to grow slowly, and his clothes were torn. Ron sighed helplessly. Why do you kindly persuade others, but others always refuse to listen? Lu Chi, who turned into a human and animal body, grabbed it with a claw, and Ron turned around and kicked it out. A wave of air rushed out from the place where the 2 met. A few minutes later, Ron, whose clothes were only torn a few holes, bent over and picked up the 2 packs of snacks placed aside. He looked at lying in the corner and was beaten back to human form. His whole body was wounded and his appearance was very miserable. He was so angry that he almost crawled. Lu Chi, who couldn't get up, said, I will stay in the city of 7 waters for a while. After 7 days, I will wait for you in the tavern on the central street. 7 days later, Lu Chi, with gauze on his face, came to Ron. It's worthy of being a zone fruit capable person of Grandmaster 6 forms. The injury is good, but it is fast. Ron sipped the juice and looked at Lu Chi, who was wearing a black top hat and sullenly, with a smile. Can I manage what I want in 1 month? In 2 months, add another 100 million Baileys. No. Ron shook his head. A flash of anger flashed in Lu Chi's eyes. Impossible. Where can I get you such a demanding boat in such a short time? Is it difficult? I thought it was just an open-mouth thing for you, Lu Chi. Ron pretended to be surprised. After all, you are. Lu Chi looked at him and immediately became as if he was about to kill. Ron smiled, leaned on the chair, held the juice cup in his hand, bit the straw, and drank. A month and a half, 50 million Baileys. I completely forgot your identity and I left after everything was done. Here, make sure not to interfere with your mission. Although he is rich, since he can knock on Lu Chi, why not knock? Lu Chi was extremely annoyed when he heard what he said. Although he understands that he is taking the opportunity to blackmail himself, but considering the task and the strength of this guy. Sure enough, it's better to clarify the relationship as soon as possible. He agreed to Ron's terms. In this way, Ron didn't have to run around about the boat. After selling the pirate ship, for the next month and a half, Ron spent the entire purchase of various high-end furniture, high-end kitchenware, entertainment equipment, as well as a large number of steel materials and equipment and tools. 1.5 months later, Ron, who had spent hundreds of millions of Baileys, saw the new ship. The materials are exactly in accordance with his requirements, and the main structure uses the branches and trunks of the treasure tree atom. It is precisely because of this that the value of this ship is at least more than 300 million Baileys. Although I don't know where Lucci got it, he is definitely bleeding a lot. After getting the new ship, Ron spent half a month to carry out a series of design mechanical transformations and put all the purchased things in it. Then I bought it in the city of Seven Waters for 2 days, and everything was ready to be stored. He left the capital of the Seven Waters in the big ship he named the Voyager. On this Voyager, there are recreation rooms, library, aquarium, exercise room, kitchen with huge refrigerator, granary, bathroom, flower room, fish tank and so on. After Ron sailed out of the Seven Waters city, he decided on the direction of the ship based on the understanding of ocean currents and winds brought by the system chart and navigational Grandmaster skills. He went straight into the machinery room. Master Machinery Grandmaster has many ideas in his mind. Now that the tools and materials are all complete, he naturally wants to realize them. 5 days later, Ron made a very sophisticated mechanical arm that could move according to his ideas and could perfectly assist him in his work. 10 days later, Ron successfully built a water locomotive that relies on coke as fuel, which can fire cannonballs and lasers. 15 days later, Ron installed a variety of powerful weapons on the ship, even more advanced than Marines' warships. 20 days later, Ron installed a newly developed laser barrier on the ship, which has 7 layers. Once opened, the entire ship is covered by 7 layers of light shields, and outsiders without permission cannot enter. 30 days later, Ron made a solo aircraft and small submarine, powered by a coke jet. In addition, there are all kinds of small things. Soon, 1.5 months passed. During this period, Ron's ship encountered the pirate ship 3 times. Attacked him once, and not the other 2. The pirate ship that attacked him and all the pirates on the ship were used by Ron to try the new black knife Chushui. Unlike Reikuri's burst and sharpness, this black sword Chushui's slash was heavier, cohesive, and amazing. After smashing a few dark slashes to kill the captain of the pirate ship who ate his own devil fruit, and the rest of the crew, Ron used the pirate ship as a target again to test the power of these newly developed weapons. Tracking shells, lasers, machine gun bullets. In less than 10 seconds, the pirate ship was completely destroyed. And this is not full firepower. Ron did a calculation. If the firepower of the weapons on the ship is now strong, it is absolutely as powerful as the firepower of 10 Marine warships combined. It's just that it consumes a lot of mechanical steel and gunpowder, so use it as little as possible. 2 more days passed in a blink of an eye. On this day, an island appeared in front of the sea. The chart shows that the Voyager has arrived at Gaia Island in the first half of the Grand Line. The sky above Gaia Island is Sky Island. Ron stopped the production machine and walked out of the machine room to the deck. Then is Sky Island above. Ron, dressed in overalls, gloves, and work goggles, with dark hair, stood on the turf deck and looked at the sky above the island. If you count the time, that Gaia Enel should have just begun to rule Sky Island right now. The sea breeze shook Ron's hair, and the long bangs on his forehead swayed gently, a pair of clear and calm eyes with a hint of thought. Now he, or the current thunder fruit-capable Enel, which one will be stronger? Ron smiled suddenly. This question, if you don't fight head-on, you probably won't know. He turned and walked into the boat. Let's take a shower first. Dip, check the host location Gaia Island, meet the sign-in conditions, do you sign in? Sign in. With the famous knife Reikuri hanging around his waist, Ron, wearing black trousers and a white short-sleeved hooded sweater, put his hands in the sweater kabuto, and walked on the magic valley town of Gaia. It was on the streets of this town that the future Luffy met Blackbeard. Sign in is successful, get a sign in reward, vitality value plus 10. Ron felt the heat in his body and the tearing sensation before muscle strengthening. He had felt this feeling nearly 100 times, and he was very familiar with it. The human body has a limit, but since he broke through 100 points of vitality and blood, he has already broken the limit many times. Only by breaking through the limits of the human body can one climb higher. The top powers on the sea are all like this. There was a jingle. Ron opened the door and walked into the tavern by the side of the street. After sitting in the tavern for a while, He heard some legends about the islands in the sky and the time when the upward current erupted, then he left the tavern. Walking on the streets of the town of Gaia, Ron pinched his chin and thought secretly. Will it be more than a month before the next descending ocean current erupts? He doesn't plan to stay here for another month. Sure enough, let's go up with a flying machine. But Ron was not in a hurry. After all, he had been floating in the ocean for almost 2 months before he touched the land. This kind of down-to-earth feeling should be felt an aftertaste. After resting and wandering on Gaia Island for 2 days, after adjusting his condition, he returned to the ship, opened the protective cover on the ship, and then drove the aircraft into the sky. Then, what is that? The people on Gaia Island were panicked when they saw the UFO rushing into the sky. Everyone ran to the street, looking up at the sky. Among them was Bellamy, who laughed at Luffy's dream afterwards. Under the gaze of the Gaia Islanders, the UFO rushed into the clouds in a slanted upward posture and disappeared from sight. Sky Island, the White Sea. Ron is driving the aircraft, floating above the White Sea, and the White Sea is higher above it, on which the Angel Island and the God Island are. Ron waited for a while without hearing the system's prompt, and then continued to fly the aircraft upwards. Through the thick sea of clouds, an island appeared before his eyes. It was a Pyado, part of Gaia Island that was washed up on Sky Island by rising currents 400 years ago. There is a small island next to that island, floating in the White Sea. It should be the Angel Island where Sky Island residents live. Ron didn't intend to hide his whereabouts. He drove the aircraft across the sky over Angel Island and headed towards a Pyado. A crowd of Sky Island residents noticed this strange aircraft of unknown origin. What is that? A flying robot bird. So amazing, so fast. Some Sky Island residents even fluttered their wings, wanting to fly up to see what happened. But their speed is completely incomparable with that black steel strange bird. On the lovely street of Angel Island, a young girl about 10 years old with little celestial wings and light yellow braids holding a harp, staring blankly at the steel flying machine flying over her. The pet cloud fox dragging with the cotton under his feet also looked straight. The girl Canis stared blankly at the unidentified black aircraft flying across the sky's path. What's that? It seems to be from the pilgrimage area. Cece. At her feet, the Yunhu named Cece tilted his head and looked cute. When Ron drove the aircraft into the sky above a Payador, in the upper floors of the Shandora ruins on the huge bean vine, the Logia thunder fruit-capable person, the god who dominates Sky Island. Enel opened his eyes. Okay, an intruder in an unidentified aircraft. Enel squinted. Dare to break into the island of God without authorization. It seems that a trial is needed. He immediately summoned the 4 priests through the hard net, told them the specific location, and asked them to immediately catch the sinner who broke into this god's territory without authorization. The aircraft landed in a forested clearing in a Pyado, and Ron walked out of it. Thoughts moved. The King's Treasure's ability was activated. The entire aircraft sank slowly, sank into the void, and disappeared. Dip, check the location of the host Sky Island, you can sign in, and you can get corresponding sign-in rewards. Do you sign in? 23. Sign in. Ron nodded. He already felt the prying at this moment, coming from a very far distance. As expected, Enel used the Thunder Fruit ability to cover the entire island's hard network. He should have discovered and determined his position now. Sign in is successful. Get a sign-in reward. Blood value +10. Get the sign-in reward. Ultimate hard net. The moment the system sound fell, something in Ron's mind exploded instantly. His eyes became godless and hollow in an instant, and an incomparably deep light appeared in the depths of his pupils. When he reached LV3, observation hockey was completely released, and the range began to rapidly expand outward from a radius of 100 meters. The radius is 300 meters, 400 meters, 500 meters, 600 meters, 700 meters, 1,000 meters, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 9 kilometers, 10,000 meters. At this moment, just like Enel, who relied on Thunderfruit's ability to enhance his hard network, the entire Apayado was enveloped by Ron's observation hockey. He even saw Enel lying on the bed in the palace, and those facing the priests and soldiers came here. Observation hockey LV3 right pointing arrow LV4. This is ultimate hard net, what the breadth of observation hockey can do. Ron closed his eyes and felt the power well. At the same time, in the superstructure of the ruins, Enel, who was swept by his observation hockey, was also surprised. That feeling just now was, the hard net. Is that the outsider? Wearing a white headscarf, earlobes very large and long, his upper body naked, Enel in bloomers squinted his eyes. Dare to spy on God. He slowly sat up on the bed, stood up, picked up the golden stick on the side, and walked out of the house with a gloomy expression of bare feet. Such a guy. He must be punished by God. Ron's observation hockey, and Enel's hard net covered the entire Sky Island at the same time. If the scope is the same, that is, the breadth is the same, then the quality of who is competing, that is, the depth of perception and prediction is higher. Enel mainly relies on the ability of Logia Thunder Fruit. It relies on electric waves to enhance the coverage, and relies on electric waves to strengthen the induction of the enemy's muscle activity to predict its next move. In fact, observation hockey, which is the predictive ability of the hard network, does not go too far. Ron can vaguely feel this at this moment. Among the 4 priests, Empty Animal Husband, Ohm rushed to Ron's forest first. He carried a long knife, led a dog and several magic soldiers, and walked towards the black-haired boy who was standing between the mountains and clearings with his eyes closed. A foreigner who has entered the continent of God, you have violated God. Ohm lifted the long knife in his hand and pointed it at Ron. Now I will give you the god of death to punish you. His voice fell, followed by a huge white dog and the magic soldiers around him rushing towards the black-haired boy. When they approached the black-haired boy 3 meters around, the other 3 priests also led their people to rush here. Is it preempted by Ohm? Captain of the Air Guard, Geddes said with a smile. Seeing that the attack was about to approach the black-haired boy with closed eyes, Mori no Daigo, Shadley felt a little uneasy. Be careful, the voice hasn't fallen yet. The black-haired boy with closed eyes lifted his foot and kicked out the approaching soldiers. An extremely long cyan crescent wind blade engulfed the fierce gale and swept across the bodies of a group of god soldiers. It was like a sickle passing through the waves of wheat, cutting them silently. Looking at the unabated crescent wind blade that came to him, Ohm's hair stood upright. Why is there no sense in my hard network at all? Before he could think about it, he immediately slashed out with a knife, and at the same time equipped Yunbei on the knife. The cyan crescent wind blade pushed him back 10 meters before dissipating. After Ohm blocked the blow, his hands were shaking, almost unable to hold the knife. Seeing this scene, the other 3 priests all looked horrified. It knocked Ohm back with one blow. How come? This guy is very strong. Let's go together. Sky Knight, Shira screamed, and took the lead to attack the black-haired boy with a spear. Mori no Daigo, Shadley and, Captain of the Sky Guard, Geddes also immediately followed. The 3 hard nets are all deployed, trying to predict the actions of the enemy in front of them. But, Shadley, who is best at hard net among the 3, suddenly paled, and there was a flash of horror and incredible in his eyes. Why can't I feel anything? Watch out! Sky Knight, Shira jumped into the air, with a spear wrapped in flames in his hand, and pierced like a tongue of fire toward the black-haired boy with his back facing him. Next second, the black-haired teenager flashed and disappeared in place. His eyes narrowed. What? He hit the ground with a heavy blow, smashing a big hole. Where did he go? Geddes turned his head and looked around. Shadley's forehead was covered with cold sweat. That was the hard net. And it is the same as the gods, a higher level hard net. This. How is it possible? Where? A magic soldier pointed in one direction. Everyone turned to look. I saw the black-haired boy standing in a clearing about 20 meters away from the crowd, with his back facing 4 priests and many magic soldiers. In their horrified eyes, the black-haired young man with his back facing them stretched out his right hand and plunged into the void, and from the rippling void like the surface of the water, he drew a blade of lightning entwined with lightning. Geddes couldn't help swallowing. Shadley's eyes widened. Ohm was in cold sweat, and his face was full of fear. Next second, a huge slash that entangled the thunder was in their wide-open eyes and slashed towards them. Then it exploded. The sword energy entwining thunder is scattered everywhere. In an instant, the 4 priests and many magical soldiers were covered with sword marks and all fell down. After swinging Raikiri and cutting out the sword, Ron, who opened his eyes, looked up and smiled in the distance. What do you think of this sword? An arrogant who calls himself a god. Enel, who was standing on the heights of the palace with a golden stick, was provoked by him and sneered. Do you think this can challenge the gods? It's really wishful thinking, ignorance. He raised his hand in the direction Ron was. Let you see it, the power of the gods. He fell silent. Above Ron, thunder appeared out of thin air. Thunder penalty. The rushing thunder smashed down at Ron at a rapid speed. But Ron, who had been predicted in advance, shaved and dodged. The lightning smashed into the sky, but it cleaved the earth into a large hole spattered by lightning, and the surrounding trees were scorched, and flames were set ablaze. Want to compete with God for speed? Enel sensed the flickering figure swiftly moving in the mountains and forests, his eyes narrowed slightly, and the corners of his mouth raised a sneer. In the next second, his body turned into a thunderlight and instantly disappeared in place. Discharge. A flash of thunder suddenly appeared in front of Ron, who was speeding in the mountains and forests. Ron, who had sensed this attack, did not hesitate, and Reikiri was wrapped in golden thunder and invisible armament hockey in his hands. Call. Changes to the breathing method of the sun. The breath of thunder, full focus. Ron's speed suddenly erupted, at a speed comparable to thunder and lightning, coupled with observation hockey's perception. He dodged lightning attacks continuously in an instant and dashed forward. When he approached the surprised face of Enel, Reikiri in his hand passed a touch of perfection. The Archive, following the cracks of the thunder and lightning, slashed out at high speed. Thunder's breath 4 type far thunder. Arrogant as Enel originally didn't plan to dodge, after all, the physics department's attack was useless to him, but when the high-speed blade approached, an ultimate dangerous chill surged through the hard network. He knew he was wrong. He immediately used electric light to elementify himself. But it was a few tenths of a second late. Reikiri, who had wrapped armament hockey, still tore through the thunder and swept across his body that hadn't been fully elementalized. Cough. Enel opened his mouth with a huge cut that was about to cut his shoulder diagonally across his chest, spitting out a large mouthful of bright red blood. This was the first time he was injured and bleeding since getting thunder fruit. But this kind of injury is nothing to him. As long as the wound is burned with the high temperature of thunder, the bleeding can be stopped. But it takes time. Ron won't give him time at all. The blade that pierced the thunder fell towards Enel again. Enel, with a bleeding mouth, gritted his teeth, and then turned into an electric light and disappeared in place. Have you escaped? With observation hockey, Ron felt the figure swiftly move away from the place with thunder and lightning, and did not chase him. He put Reikiri in his scabbard. He stepped on his feet, leapt onto the tall tree trunk, and flew away in one direction. Unexpectedly, the knife didn't cut off his body. Did most of the damage be transferred in time with elementalization? Ron thought to himself. As expected of thunder fruit, the speed of elementalization is faster than he thought. Enel's Logia thunder fruit is still tricky. Is it okay? This time it was because of his arrogance in character and arrogance of fruit ability that Ron was caught off guard with armament hockey and the explosive thunderous breath. Next time I see Enel, there may not be such a good opportunity. It will be a big battle. Even Ron does not necessarily guarantee that he can win the boat. Leave when you finish the matter. Ron stepped on his feet and rushed towards the huge bean vine in the center of a Piado. Enel returned to the ruins palace and screamed in pain while burning the wound with high temperature and thunder to prevent the wound from bleeding. That kid, I'm going to kill him at all. His roar resounded throughout the palace. When Ron went to the ruins of Shandora, he encountered the attack of the giant serpent with tusks. But after Ron pulled out Reikiri and gave it a slash, cutting a big wound on its back, the giant snake ran away in fear. Ron didn't continue pursuing either. Soon he followed the giant bean vine and climbed to the remains of Shandora. Easily found the golden clock and the historical text below. The first piece. Ron pulled out Reikiri with a smile, and after slashing several slashes in an instant, he retracted his sword and returned it to its sheath. The huge golden pillars supported on both sides of the huge golden clock were cut off and fell down. There was a bang on the ground, and the ground was smashed. System, scan into the system space. Ron said in his heart. Okay. After the system was scanned, the 2 huge golden pillars and the historical text stone were collected into the system space together. After doing this, Ron was just about to leave. At this moment, a thunderous thunder came from the sky. Then a huge thunder pillar fell from the sky. Ron shoved and escaped the blow, but the ground was shattered and collapsed, and a big crater 5 or 6 meters deep appeared. Ron turned his head to look over a ruined building. With a long scar left on his chest, Enel stood there holding a golden stick, thunderous all over, exuding a cold killing intent. This time, I won't be careless anymore. He raised his hand towards Ron, his palm thunderous. Discharge, 30 million volts. A violent thunder and lightning burst out of his palm, rushing towards Ron. Ron shoved, his figure flickered, and he kept losing Enel. Seeing that his hand had been placed on the handle of the knife, Enel narrowed his eyes slightly, his figure turned into an electric light and disappeared in the same place, moving away from Ron, and appeared further away. Do you think I will let you get close? He was very afraid of the power entangled in Ron's knife that could hurt him. So timid. Ron laughed. Is this the god on this island? Enel narrowed his eyes slightly and ignored him, just hitting the taco on his left shoulder. 30 million volts. Thunder beast. A wolf-shaped thunder wolf ran towards Ron at high speed, accompanied by a clear cold light. Reikiri unsheathed. Cut with a knife. The wolf-shaped thunder beast was swept by this one, violently flying and cutting in half. 30 million volts. Thunderbird. Enel beat the drum on his right shoulder again, and the thunderbolt turned into a thunderbird and dived quickly towards Ron. The air it flies over is full of thunder, accompanied by a burnt smell. Ron flickered, and while avoiding the thunderbird's attack, he appeared not far in front of Enel, slashing out with a slash. Enel cast the electric light again, dodged, and distanced himself from Ron. Obviously he had made up his mind not to fight him close. It seems you don't have any long-range attack methods. Standing in the distance, Enel looked at Ron and smiled triumphantly. I see how long you can hide. He struck the taiko drum with both hands, and the thunder and lightning that circulated all over his body suddenly skyrocketed dozens of times. 60 million volts. Thunder Dragon. A huge thunder dragon rushed out of him, and the air in the entire ruins instantly became dry. There was lightning in the air, and stones on the ground were shattered by scattered lightning. Ron was hit by an overflowing arc on his left arm numbed slightly, but at the same time, he was surprised to feel that the power of the thunder and lightning seemed to be instantly absorbed by his right leg. Is it a sublimation nuclear explosion kick? Could it be upgraded by the power of thunder and lightning? Looking at the terrifying thunder dragon rushing towards him, a flash of light flashed in Ron's eyes. Good coming. Just give it a try. A moment hockey, hardened. Ron's right leg instantly became as black as steel. Tempest kick. He displayed the level LV7 Tempest kick on his right leg, hardened with the armed color, and the cyan wind blade that was entwined with hockey. The awe-inspiring cyan wind blade collided with the huge thunder dragon. Boom. Thunder and violent winds. Wind blades overflowed for 4 weeks. The ground layer was shattered, soil and stones were blown away, and more were completely destroyed by thunder and lightning. The cyan wind blade still lost to the violent power of the thunder dragon, and was completely torn apart. The thunder dragon hit Ron on the ground. Ron's hand, Reikiri, slashed into the sky with a cross slash, shattering the huge thunder dragon, but part of it fell at him. He raised his armed hardened right leg to meet the falling thunder and lightning. ZZZ. Although armament hockey blocked most of the destructive power of thunder and lightning, Ron was still numbed with electricity, but to his surprise, his right leg was really absorbing the thunder and lightning. After realizing this, Ron's eyes gradually lit up. Could it be said that these lightning can increase the level of sublimation nuclear explosive kick? A sublimated nuclear kick at level LV1 can double Ron's ultimate destructive power. What about higher levels? When he looked at Enel in the distance, his eyes changed. It becomes like looking at a piece of delicious food. Enel also noticed this through the hard network at this time, and there was a chill in his heart for no reason. What the hell is this guy planning to do? Each subsequent lightning attack by Enel, Ron would deliberately wipe out most of his power with a slash, leaving only a small part, without evading, just resisting. His clothes quickly became tattered, revealing his well-balanced muscles that had been refined and refined. The more Enel hits, the more things go wrong. It clearly seemed that he had the upper hand. But he never seemed to make that guy suffer once. Instead, he seems to be still having fun. Enel watched as he hit the thunder dragon and was cut away by that guy, and the remaining violent thunder and lightning fell towards him. Boom. The ground was split by the violent thunder and lightning, and the smoke scattered. But it didn't take a while. The shabby black-haired boy walked out of it nonchalantly holding the knife. The black eyes under the broken bangs were bright and shining, and his aura increased. Where did it come from? This monster. With a drop of cold sweat on his forehead, Enel gritted his teeth and clenched the golden stick in his hand. The god of Sky Island is a little disturbed at the moment. You have to hit him with one blow. Enel didn't intend to drag it any longer. He immediately displayed the strongest trick he can release. I saw him overflowing with terrifying thunder pulp, thick thunder and lightning gushing out from him like a thunder snake, and then wrapped around him, gradually forming a huge thunder giant. At the moment when the thunder god man took shape, the earth instantly became extremely dry. In the sky, thunder clouds converged towards this side. The thunder and lightning roared in the thundercloud. 200 million volts. Thor, the huge thunder god transformed into Enel, raised his giant thunder hand and shot it towards Ron. Before it fell, dozens of thick thunder snakes smashed from his palms to the ground. The thunder and lightning blasted around Ron, and the lightning splashed everywhere, making him feel like he was in a thunder field. Ron squinted his eyes. Although Enel relies heavily on fruit ability, it has to say that there are still a few brushes to develop such a powerful trick. With such a terrifying power of thunder and lightning, with his current armament hockey and the slash that entered the realm of iron slashing, can it be cut away? Have no idea, but always try it. He stretched out his hand and drew the black knife Chushui from the void. The left hand is black sword Chushui, and the right hand is Reikiri. The sword power and sword intent of Zontai Jianhao is completely released. The two crimson swords are wrapped around the two knives along the hilt. The breath of the sun, the breath of the moon, full focus. Armament hockey, hardened. The two swords were instantly entangled by armament hockey, rendering them purple and black. Facing the huge thunder god's palm that fell from above, Ron's dark pupils flashed a flash of red light, and Ron, whose face was full of murderous colors, stomped forward with his right foot. The round ground under his feet shook and then sank suddenly. Moon's Breath 14 type fierce transformation Sky Manchurian Moon. Closing square bracket. Ron's two knives in his hands were swung upwards with incredible aura and speed. In an instant, countless giant crimson moons slashed the thunder palm that fell down like a torrential rain. Thunder and lightning burst from the earth. The ruins of buildings were broken down, and the ground was cracked by thunder and lightning, and there were countless pits. The slashing gust of wind flew around, the rocks roared, and the sharp sword intent cut the earth wantonly, and the earth was chopped open like tofu. Ron held two big sharp knives for 21 work, and he swung his knives constantly, with countless shadows of the knives. Under the swaying fine bangs, the red glow in the depths of the black pupils is getting brighter. Give me, open. Following Ron's words fell hundreds of huge crescent moon slashes that entangled armament hockey abruptly shred the Thor's giant palm that could destroy the entire ruins. Thousands of fragments of thunder fell toward the ground like rain. The relics of Shandora over this Dooman became like a thunder country. Ron, with two swords in his hand, flashed and appeared in midair, looking down at Enel, who had turned into a huge Thor. He raised the double knives in his hands, and the crimson sword power was extremely strong on the purple-black double knives. Enel, who has turned into a giant Thor, has not had time to counterattack. Ron's knife was already cut out. Moon Breath 16 type Moon Rainbow Lonely Stay in the Moon. Numerous giant slashes that entangled armament hockey were accompanied by the moon wind blade towards Enel, who had turned into a giant Thor. Under this violent slash like a waterfall, the huge Thor gradually broke apart, and a large number of violent thunder and lightning scattered into the air, no matter how difficult it was to maintain. Yes, Enel didn't want to end here. He controlled all the lightning, poured into the remaining Thor's arm, and turned into a huge Thor's fist to hit Ron in the sky above. If Ron dodges this blow, his body of Thor will definitely be unable to perform another blow. Good job. Ron let go of the two knives in his hands and let two big sharp knives sink into the void beside him with the tip of 21 sharp knives. Looking at the thunder god's fist that swept at him with the remaining thunder and lightning, Ron grinned, his eyes flashing crazily. He also intends to respond with Nirvana. He immediately stepped heavily in the air with his right foot, and the air suddenly exploded. The air waves are rolling. His figure disappeared in an instant, reaching a height of hundreds of meters in the blink of an eye. Breath of the sun, full focus. Ron took a deep breath in the air, concentrated all his power on the back of his right leg, and hardened with LV5 armament hockey. He moved towards the thunder and lightning fist below, and violently stretched out his right foot and kicked it out. The figure fell sharply from a high altitude, leaning a line. Armament hockey's hardened right leg was entwined with golden thunder. After it rubbed rapidly with the air, it was wrapped in a fierce flame, making Ron's figure falling rapidly in the air like a burning golden meteor. The lightning giant punch and Ron's sublimation nuclear kick collide together. There was a boom. Along with the terrifying shock wave rushing out of the surroundings, the thunderclouds in the sky were all broken open, revealing a huge hole. The entire Shandora ruins began to shake and collapse. Ha! The burning golden meteor pierced the thunder and lightning giant fist, pierced through the entire Thor, and landed on the ruins ground below, slanting a line. Boom! The entire giant bean vine shook. With his landing as the center, the ground of the ruins with a radius of 1,000 meters sank downwards, and began to disintegrate in layers. The violent air wave blew away, and the buildings and vegetation on the ruins were wiped out. The entire Shandora ruins began to crumble and collapse on a large scale. Ahem! Ron half kneeled on the ground after being struck by a violent lightning, panting for breath. His face was extremely pale, and even the small half of his neck was burned. Although a large amount of thunder was absorbed by his right leg, he was still burned extensively by thunder and lightning, and part of his skin was even scorched. The pain was so unbearable that it almost made people faint. But at this moment, his eyes were extremely bright and pleasantly surprised. Zizi. All the clothes and shoes on his right leg disappeared, and on his right leg that was as dark as steel, golden thunder and lightning flashed. Sublimation nuclear kick. Kill kick, which can gather the whole body's power on the right foot, and can burst out the ultimate destructive power. Current level. LV2, increase in destructive power, 200%. After absorbing a large amount of lightning energy, this must-kill kick was successfully upgraded to the second level, allowing Ron to exert his ultimate destructive power 3 times his own. Enel returned to his original form, with blood spilling from the corner of his mouth, slowly turning his head and looking at Ron in the big pit in the distance. Tell me, what is your name? Ron. Ron stood up swayingly, turned his head and glanced at him slightly. It's an ordinary traveler on the Qinghai Sea, remember it for me. Yes, I will, lose to Qinghai people. After Enel said the last sentence, he couldn't hold it anymore, his eyes rolled white, he lost consciousness, and fell face down with a plop. Ron didn't even look at him. After regaining some vigor with the breathing method of the day, he used the king's treasure to take out the aircraft from the system space, sat on it, and drove the aircraft away. He did not kill Enel, nor did he intend to recruit him as his partner. For this kind of guy, leave it to Luffy as an experience. Angel Island near Sky Island. Angel Beach. Girl Canis is playing the harp with her pet Cloud Fox. The young girl with 2 small wings on her back is pure and as beautiful as an angel. Yun Si San San who is cute. The sound of the piano is pleasant to the ears. Above the sea of clouds, the scenery is even more beautiful. This scene is like a picture scroll, which makes people not want to bother. But soon, a sound that pierced the sky broke the silence. Canis's piano paused, but didn't stop. But as the voice grew louder, it seemed to be getting closer and closer, and at the same time the pet Yunfox made a little panic. The girl Canis had to stop playing and turned her head to look. I saw a jet black aircraft flying towards here from not far away, flying lower and lower, and finally landed on Angel Beach not far from Canis. It's the one before. Girl Canis's eyes widened slightly, her eyes a little curious. Is this thing made of steel? Why can it fly in the sky? Where did it fly from? Cece. The Yunhu named Cece ran towards that side. Canis was taken aback, and hurried to chase. Cece, don't run, stop. It was about 10 meters away from the black aircraft that Canis caught Yun Fox. Cece, don't run around. At this time, with a sound, the mysterious black aircraft opened. Canis, who was holding Yunhu, couldn't help but look over. I saw a black-haired teenager with a tattered and naked upper body coming out of it. Looking at the burns and scorched marks all over his body. Girl Canis's eyes widened slightly. What a serious injury. What surprised Canis even more was the plain expression of the black-haired boy who seemed to care about his injuries. Normal people who have suffered such an injury may have fainted in pain long ago. Could it be that he can't feel the pain? Connus couldn't help thinking. Ron stepped out of the aircraft and stepped on the soft sand of Angel Beach, facing the cool breeze in front of him, bathing in the white light of the sun, and closing his eyes with enjoyment. Healing. Following Ron's heart silently, strands of verdant and gleaming, vigorous light and rain converged on him from the surrounding void, and in Connus's wide-open surprised eyes, it rushed to his hideous and terrifying burns and scorched areas. Connus stared in shock at the magical verdant rain. His injuries were healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The burned skin quickly healed. The charred black skin on his face and body quickly fell off, exposing new growth underneath. Fair skin. Soon, his horrible injury disappeared completely, and no more wounds were found. Standing shirtless on the soft sand of Angel Beach, Ron shook his fist and smiled while facing the sea of clouds. The injury was completely repaired and in perfect condition. The first time I used the healing technique, it was really easy to use, but it was a pity that I could only use it once a day. He turned his head and looked at the angel girl holding Yunhu on the left. What's your name? Connus, who was holding the cloud fox, stared blankly at the naked upper body in front of him. The naked muscle lines were perfectly symmetrical. The handsome, mysterious black-haired boy didn't recover for a while. Cece. It wasn't until the cloud fox in her arms screamed that she suddenly recovered. My name is. She hasn't finished speaking yet. Suddenly, the mysterious and strange black-haired boy turned his head and looked at Bai. Whoosh! A huge monster with a weird appearance rushed out of the white sea, opened a huge worm mouth full of sharp teeth, and rushed towards Connus below. Connus only felt the top of his head dark, and when he looked up, he could see that the huge mouth of the blood basin occupies all of his vision, and his sharp teeth glowed with a sharp cold light. Before she could react, accompanied by the whistling sound, a sharp whip kick hit the huge and brutal cloud sea monster from the side. The air froze for a moment. Boom! The strange beast that leapt in front of Connus was kicked out. In the next second, a huge cyan wind blade cut it in half in the air, and a large amount of weird blue blood sprayed out in the air. Ron, standing in front of her, retracted his raised leg. Until then, looking at the corpse of the young beast that fell from the air, the girl Connus realized what had happened. Her pretty face turned pale in an instant, her legs were soft and she hugged the young fox and fell on the beach. His eyes were full of horror and fear. It took a while to get over. She looked at the black-haired young man with her back facing her, with a trace of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you for saving me. No thanks. In the eyes of the girl Connus, the extremely mysterious and powerful black-haired teenager turned around, turned his back to the sea of clouds, and smiled at her. Your piano sounds very good, and I am interested in being a musician. Come on my boat. Connus was a little dazed. The black-haired teenager in front of her stroked her chin and said to himself. Sure enough, it was a bit too sudden, then let's start with self-introduction. He reached out to Connus and smiled at her. My name is Ron, and I am from Qinghai below. My name is Connus. Some nervous girl Connus reached out and shook his hand. Really, Ron thought. When I saw her playing the harp in Angel Beach just now in the air, I wondered if it was Connus, the honest angel in the original book, and it was her. Ron let go and looked at the girl angel in front of him. Connus, do you want to go to Qinghai? Connus heard the words, a hesitation flashed in his eyes, and said softly. The people of Sky Island are not allowed to leave by God. Compared to her interest in Qinghai, she fears the sanctions of God Enel more. Ron smiled when he heard the words. Don't worry, Enel can't interfere with what I'm going to do. Hearing him calling God's name, Connus opened his eyes wide, looking at him in horror. No, you can't call God's name directly, otherwise God's sanction will be. So what? Ron looked at her and smiled. Connus was stunned. God's sanctions have not been lowered. What is the problem? As if seeing Connus' confusion and doubts, Ron smiled. Enel is probably still unconscious. You don't care about him, just tell me if you want to get on my boat and become my travel partner. Connus, the girl angel holding Yunhu, looked at him and nodded gently. Ron smiled brightly. Good. The next few days, Ron stayed on Angel Island, or bought Sky Island specialties on Lovely Street, or fished in the White Sea. His visitor from Qinghai also aroused the curiosity and welcome of many Sky Island residents. 4 days later, after Canis persuaded her father and packed his luggage, the two left Sky Island in a black aircraft filled with coke fuel. Gaia Island. Looking at the black aircraft that disappeared in the sky a few days ago, the residents of Magic Valley began to discuss it again. When someone was on Gaia Island, he saw an angel with wings come out of the black flying machine. The legend about Sky Island once again sparked heated debate on this island. And this time, Ron had already driven the Voyager and left the island with the girl Canis. This day, the sky is clear. The Voyager is like a flat boat, following the current on the blue sea. As this Qinghai, it's really different from Sky Island. Canis stood on the deck holding Yunhuzi, looking at the blue sea in front of him and exclaimed, "Cece." Ron walked out of the room on the second floor, leaned on the railing, looked at her and smiled. "How do you feel?" Canis looked back at him, smiling and crooked. "Very good. By the way, Ron, is there anything I can help?" Can you cook?" Ron thought for a while. "Of course, I cook all my meals." "Okay, then you will be in charge of cooking from today." "Understood, Captain." Cece. On the same day, Ron and Canis roughly talked about common sense on this sea that is different from Sky Island, as well as marine, pirate and devil fruit. Canis listened carefully. "When I heard that there are many existences like the gods on Sky Island and Enel in this sea, and there are even many strong men whose strength far exceeds him." The young girl angel showed a very shocked expression. "At the same time, I feel the vastness and danger of this beautiful sea, which is not at the same level as Sky Island." After that day, apart from daily cooking, playing the piano, and feeding Yunhuzi, she went into the library on the ship. She wants to understand this sea as soon as possible. Tenton passed. Canis's understanding of this sea is getting richer. World government, celestial dragons, marine, revolutionary army, pirates, Grand Line, New World, 7 warlords of the sea, 3 kinds of demon fruit power, all over the world. He even learned a lot of common sense that Ron hadn't even noticed. For example, there are 173 countries in the entire pirate world. For example, islands are divided into small islands, medium islands, and large islands. With a complete ecosystem, there is no shortage of water and food, and people are inhabited to form a small island. It can be called a small island. Marine generally builds military bases on small islands. Medium-sized islands are larger than small islands, and there are at least several small towns and even large towns. Among them, a marine branch will be established, and the highest officer of the branch will be at the rank of colonel, who has jurisdiction over the island and nearby waters. Large islands can accommodate a country. Marine will not set up branches in them to avoid conflicts of power. This day, Canis is still reading in the library. Suddenly an explosion sounded on the sea in the distance. "What's wrong?" She ran out hurriedly. "It's okay, it's the 2 pirate groups fighting each other." Standing on the deck with his eyes closed and holding a huge steel dumbbell in one hand, Ron kept swinging his sword without raising his head. The pirates are fighting. Wearing white 3/4 trousers and showing a pair of straight white legs, Canis stepped onto the deck and looked over there. Follow her gaze. I saw the sea in the distance. The pirate groups with more than 10 pirate ships on both sides fought together. The artillery fire continued. The sea exploded one after another, and one pirate ship sank one after another in the artillery fire. Extremely intense. This is the battle between the pirates. How terrible. Canis was startled. Marine is here too. It looks like it's going to be lively. Ron's voice rang behind her. After a while, a few warships emerged from the other side of the sea, and fired at the raging 2 pirate regiments at the same time. The sea in that direction instantly became chaotic, like a sea of flames. Canis turned his head, looked at Ron and said, "Are we going to be pirates too?" Don't know. Are you scared? If you want to go back, now I can send." Ron hadn't finished speaking yet. With Yunhuzi standing on his shoulders, Canis holding a telescope in his hand shook his head. "I am not afraid, nor regret it at all. On the contrary, I am very fortunate to be able to come to this sea and travel with you. I am just worried. I'm worried that my weakness will drag you down." Ron heard the words and stopped waving his huge dumbbell. He opened his eyes, turned his head to look at Canis and smiled. it turns out it's because of this. That's pretty easy to handle, can't you just become stronger? But, she glanced at the huge dumbbell marked in Ron's hand, no matter how I exercise, it is impossible to become as strong as Ron you. There is more than one way to become stronger. Ron carried the huge dumbbell in his hand, looked at her and smiled. For example, how about finding a devil fruit for you? Canis was stunned when he heard the words. Devil fruit, isn't that a precious and hard to find treasure? The Logia and Zone monsters like Enel, and the ancient Zone species may not be easy to find, but the ordinary species of Paramesha and Zone should not be difficult. Ron bent down and put the huge dumbbell in his hand on the deck. But in my opinion, compared to Zone, you are more suitable for Paramesha. I will help you pay attention later on the journey. That being said, but until they arrived in the interior of Alabasta, the country of sand, Ron and the two did not encounter even one devil fruit from the pirate boats and islands they encountered along the way, or get any information about devil fruit. After all, once this kind of thing emerges, it will either be taken by some big forces, or it will be eaten directly by some people. Information about devil fruit may also be obtained through some underground channels. It's really difficult to search heedlessly in the vast ocean. But Canis herself is not in a hurry. After learning to be familiar with the common sense of the world, she now starts to learn about sailing and sailing with Ron. When arriving at Alabasta, she is already able to steer the helm skillfully. The Voyager docked on the shore, and Ron, wrapped in a black cloak, disembarked with Canis, who was wearing a white long coat and covering his wings. This is the superpower in the first half of the Grand Line, Alabasta. Canis, who was holding Yunhu, looked forward with a little excitement. According to the book, this country was built by the descendants of the 20 kings who founded the world government 800 years ago. It is also called the Kingdom of Sand. It has a standing army of more than 600,000, and its land area is probably more than 10 times the size of Sky Island. As soon as Ron's feet stepped on the ground, a system reminder sounded in his mind. Drop. Check the host's location Alabasta. You can sign in to get sign-in rewards. Do you sign in? Sign in. Drop. Sign in successfully. Get sign-in reward. Vitality value +10. Get a sign-in reward. A special treasure endless jug. Ron looked forward to the effects of the endless jug of this special treasure, but found that there was only a single line of memory of massive drinks, refreshed daily, and never exhausted. Ah, this is it. Ron looked at the heavy endless jug in his hand, black lines appearing in his forehead. It turns out that there is really no additional effect at all, only drinks can be provided. Am I short of money for this wine? The wine he bought at Sabayati Archipelago hasn't been finished yet, and there are still plenty of them in the system space. Ron somewhat speechlessly put the endless jug in his hand into the system space on the other side of the void through the king's treasure. And he just finished it. Suddenly there was movement in the water beside the ship. Ron and Canis turned to look. I saw a cute-looking manatee with something like a tortoise shell on the back emerging from the water, landed on the shore, and stood in front of them. Diaresis these are. Canis looked at these creatures curiously. Ron explained with a smile, it's a kung fu manatee, a specialty of Alabasta. He looked at the kung fu manatee headed by him. Kung fu manatee shook their heads and waved their tails. Hungry. The language skill grandmaster, Ron, who can understand even the words of animals, smiled and said, it's saying, if you want to go ashore, try good to defeat it. If you can't, it proves that you are useless. How did the Lord come and crawl back? Ron translated here and looked at the kung fu manatee, his eyes narrowed slightly, and his eyesight was not good enough to kill him. I really dare to say it. Canis stroked his forehead with his hand, a little bit spitting out. Ron, normal Qinghai people shouldn't understand animals. She just finished speaking, accompanied by a bang. The kung fu manatee that was speaking wild words circled around, and a big red envelope popped out of his head and fell in front of Ron. Ron retracted his fist and looked at the arrogant kung fu manatee who had been knocked to the ground with a smile. Do you dare to be arrogant anymore? Manatee effort would only gradually wake up, look at it without the slightest arrogant to Ron's eyes, but very worship, small eyes sparkling staring Ron, cheerful tail shaking. Enin, do you want to worship me as a teacher? Ron moment, then think of it. Manatee effort seems to have lost indeed who, thanks to the rules on whom you are. ah. Only effort. Manatee hugged Ron's leg, side rub telling them, a pair of shining eyes full of expectations pray at him. Ron thought for a while, it said. Do you really want to worship me as a teacher? It surprised a moment, then shoved cheerful nod, a small tail rejection of fast. I will now give you a task, optimistic about the ship, and so when we come back if you are still, then I'll take you as a disciple, take you out to sea. Ron said. It pleased toward Ron nodded vigorously. Ron and Connus and other far away, took the side of the boat a handkerchief at him farewell. It is a curious animal. He laments after Connus looked back. She look around to Ron. Ron, you really want it received as a disciple, take it out to sea together. Okay. Ron smiled and nodded, is not it funny? Indeed, it is the sea but some will not be dangerous. Connus little worried. Depend upon it, but now it's even stronger than you, if we exercise more, then, can become stronger. Ron smiled. It can only practice out in the original armament hockey effort. Manatee, sufficient proof kung fu martial arts potential of this manatee population. If a good training exercise, maybe even observation hockey can awaken. Ron is looking forward to this. Alabasta indeed the country of sand. Pleasant to the eye can see are all sand, the sky shining sun, high temperatures intolerable. He and Connus sand along the road, arrived in Green City, Al Marut. But the desert there is such a bustling city. Connus turned around, and I just feel so full. Sky Island is completely different, exotic, very strange. Now Green is also very bustling city, look no experience and bring disaster crocodile work led by Baroque society. Now 6 years ago Alabasta events. Crocodile is not known whether this country has come. Play in the city of Green for a day, during Ron also inquire from the mouth of some underground forces to some news. 7 warlords of sand crocodile, one of the sea, crocodile has indeed come to this country. Now crocodile to 7 warlords of the sea, continue to hunt pirates in this country, as will often be published in the newspaper Hero, with a quite high reputation in the Alabasta. But within Alabasta no one would think. They are known as heroes, and praise the crocodile. It is now the biggest evil forces Alabasta underground organization, agency Baroque work behind the scenes boss. Code. Mr. Zero. In addition to these messages outside learned, Ron is also an underground accident that message. Baroque Society will work 4 days later, in Alabasta City Raintown, held a underground auction. The finale of the auction items, is a devil fruit. Now the whole Alabasta ground forces are in this auction and the preparations for the funds, the goal is sinking devil fruit. I scraped together a clever touches. Ron thought to himself. While there may be deliberately released crocodile bait, but it is worth to take a look. The day he took Connus town rushed toward the rain. A few days later. Alabasta, Rain Town, here regarded as the headquarters of Baroque Society. It has the largest rain throughout Alabasta Feast Casino. Compared to the previous green bustling city even more, traveling to and from the streets constantly, vendors selling, people coming and going. One in the pub. Ron and Connus sit side by side at the counter. Alive, so comfortable. Drink a large glass of cold water. Connus happy face. The owner, another drink. Coming. Ron drinking a cold beer, but also face enjoyment. And compared to the high temperature of the desert, this is really life. Cece. Fox slightest cloud leans next to him, looking at the beer in his hand, a little envious. You have to try it. Ron smiled at it. It looked at his face. Shiny look forward to Ron, nodded his head. The owner, give it to a cold beer. Well, come right away. A few minutes later. Here, you want cold beer. Fox looked at the slightest cloud before its cold beer, licked out his tongue. Cecil, slightest, seemed to taste the sweetness, its eyes sparkling. Immediately embraced by upper limb and it's about the same size glass, it is buried drank. After a while, I will drink a large glass of cold beer down, muster little stomach, dizzy eyes, lying on the counter a smoked playing drunk hiccup. Hey Marsh, hey. Ron looking laughing. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.